They say an Omega rejecting an Alpha is suicide. Isara Vale proved them all wrong. Sold to pay her pack's debt, she was meant to bow, submit, accept her fate as a political pawn. But when she touched the Alpha King's hand during the binding ceremony, something inside her shattered and awakened. She saw his murders, his plans, the grave already dug for her. So before hundreds of witnesses, she did the impossible. She rejected him first. Now she's running through a blizzard with nothing but her instincts and a power she doesn't understand. Stay until the end to see how the rejected Omega becomes the most feared woman in the kingdom. Drop a comment with your city below. Let's see where you're watching from. The great hall of Blackstone Keep smelled like pine, iron, and fear. Isara Vale stood at the center of it all, barefoot on freezing stone, dressed in a thin ceremonial gown that might as well have been a burial shroud. Around her, hundreds of wolves, alphas, betas, even other omegas watched in silence. Their eyes weren't kind. They were hungry, curious, already dismissive. She was nothing to them. A debt payment. A body with a signature. Her father stood near the back, arms crossed, face blank. He hadn't looked at her once since they'd arrived. Not when they'd dressed her. Not when they'd dragged her into the carriage. Not when she'd whispered, "Please, don't make me do this." He'd just turned away. The Alpha King stood 10 feet away. Kalen Thorne, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver eyes that cut through the dim torchlight like blades. His reputation preceded him. 3 wars won, 2 packs absorbed, countless enemies buried in unmarked graves. He was power incarnate, and everyone in this hall knew it. They whispered about him in fearful tones. The Silver Wolf, the Conqueror, the Merciless. Isara's hands trembled. "Step forward, Omega." The command came from the officiant, an old beta in ceremonial robes. His voice echoed off the vaulted ceiling, making her feel even smaller than she already was. Isara's legs moved on instinct. She'd been trained for this, conditioned since childhood. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't look him in the eye. Don't resist. An Omega's duty is obedience. An Omega's purpose is service. Her pack's survival depended on this union. Her father had made that clear 3 weeks ago when he'd told her she was being sold. Not married, sold. The difference mattered, even if no one else cared. "Do you understand what's happening here?" her father had said that night, not looking at her. "The Vale Pack is drowning in debt." Kalen Thorne offered a solution. "You." "But I don't want—" "What you want doesn't matter. You're an Omega. You exist to serve your pack. This is your service." She'd cried that night, screamed into her pillow until her throat was raw. But no one came. No one cared. And now here she was. Kalen's gaze slid over her like she was a horse being appraised at auction. No warmth, no interest, just cold calculation. He looked at her the way someone might look at a tool, assessing its usefulness, nothing more. "Your name," he said flatly. "Isara Vale." Her voice came out smaller than she wanted, weak. "Speak up." She swallowed hard. "Isara Vale." He nodded once, already bored. "You understand the terms of this bond?" She did. She'd been briefed, lectured, threatened. She was to become his mate in name only, a political tool to stabilize the alliance between his kingdom and her pack's crumbling territory. She would have no authority, no voice, no freedom. If she bore him an heir, good. If not, she'd be discarded when someone more useful came along. She would live in the palace, but she wouldn't be a queen. She'd be a prisoner with a title. "I understand," she whispered. "Then we proceed." The officiant gestured for them to join hands. Isara's heart slammed against her ribs. This was it. The moment everything ended. The moment she stopped being a person and became property. Kalen extended his hand. She stared at it. His fingers were long, scarred from battles she'd never know about. There was dried blood under one of his nails, fresh, recent. "Just take it. Get it over with. The faster you do this, the faster it ends." She reached out. Their skin touched, and the world exploded. It wasn't pain. It wasn't pleasure. It was knowing. Images flooded her mind in a violent torrent, flashes of memory, emotion, truth. She saw Kalen standing over a body, blood on his hands, a woman's scream cut short. She saw him in a dark room, signing documents, condemning entire families to execution. She saw a young woman with auburn hair bound and gagged, thrown into a cell. The woman's eyes were terrified. She was begging. Kaylin didn't even look at her. The visions came faster. A massacre at dawn. Children crying. A village burning while Kaylin's soldiers stood guard, preventing anyone from escaping. Kaylin's face, emotionless as he gave the orders. Leave no witnesses. And then, her own death. 3 months from now. She was in a bedroom, alone. A servant brought her wine. She drank it, not knowing. The poison worked quickly. She collapsed, gasping, clawing at her throat. No one came. No one helped. Her body was found the next morning. Kaylin announced her death as a tragic illness. A week later, he was negotiating with another pack for another bride. She saw everything. The affairs he'd had with other women while his previous mates waited in their rooms. The assassinations he'd ordered to silence anyone who questioned him. The lies he'd told, the treaties he'd broken, the lives he'd destroyed without a second thought. And she understood. He was going to kill her. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Once the alliance was secured, once her pack was absorbed into his kingdom, she would become a liability. A witness. A loose end. He'd done it before. Twice. He would do it again. The visions snapped off as suddenly as they'd started. Isara gasped, stumbling backward. Her hand ripped free from his. The hall went silent. Every eye turned to her. Kaylin's eyes narrowed. What are you doing? She couldn't breathe. Her chest was too tight. The air was too thin. Everyone was staring. She could feel their confusion, their judgment, their disgust. An Omega hesitating. An Omega showing weakness. An Omega failing to complete the simplest task. What's wrong with her? Is she defective? The Veil Pack sent damaged goods. I said, "What are you doing?" His voice dropped to a growl that made her knees shake. The officiant stepped forward, nervous, wringing his hands. My lord, perhaps the Omega is overwhelmed by the honor. She will complete the bond, Kaylin snapped, not taking his eyes off Isara. Now. Isara looked up at him. Really looked. The silver eyes that showed nothing. The blood under his nails from whatever he'd killed this morning. The absolute certainty in his posture that she would obey. Because she always had. Because Omegas always did. But something inside her had cracked open when their hands touched. Something wild and furious and awake. Something that had been sleeping her entire life, suffocated under years of conditioning and fear, waiting for this exact moment to roar to the surface. She thought of the woman in the vision, the one with auburn hair, begging for her life. She thought of herself 3 months from now, dying alone, discarded. She thought of every Omega who'd ever been told she didn't matter. No, she said. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Kaylin blinked. For the first time, something flickered in his expression. Surprise. What? I said no. Her voice was stronger now, louder. I reject this bond. The hall erupted. Gasps, shouts. Someone dropped a goblet, and it shattered on the stone floor. Her father's voice rose above the chaos, furious and disbelieving. Isara, what have you done? The officiant stammered, This is highly irregular. There are protocols. Kaylin's enforcers stepped forward, hands on their weapons. Someone in the crowd laughed, high and cruel. The little Omega thinks she has a choice. Stupid girl, another voice sneered. She just killed her whole pack. Does she even understand what she's done? Kaylin will slaughter the Veils for this insult. Her father was pushing through the crowd now, his face purple with rage. You ungrateful wretch! Do you know what you've just... But Kaylin himself didn't move. He just stared at her, expression unreadable. The hall quieted, waiting for his reaction. When he spoke, his voice was soft, dangerous. You don't have that right. I do. Isara's hands were shaking so hard she had to clench them into fists to hide it. But she didn't back down, couldn't back down. I'm an Omega, not a slave. I have the right to refuse a bond. Your pack signed a contract. My father signed. Not me. She looked past him, toward the crowd, toward the witnesses. Her voice rang out, clear and steady. I didn't agree to this. I won't agree to this. I reject you, Kaylin Thorne. I reject this bond. I reject everything you are. The hall fell into a stunned silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Kaylin's jaw tightened. A muscle twitched in his cheek, his hands curled into fists at his sides. For a moment, she thought he might strike her right there in front of everyone. The tension in the room was suffocating, but then he smiled, cold, sharp, dangerous. It was worse than anger. "You just signed your own death warrant," he said softly, leaning in so only she could hear. "And your packs. I will burn the Vale territory to ash. I will hunt down every member of your bloodline. And when I'm done, I will mount your father's head on a spike as a reminder of what happens to those who insult me." Isara's heart hammered. She knew, but she couldn't stop now. If she backed down, if she submitted, she was dead anyway. At least this way she'd die on her own terms. "Then I'll die free," she said, meeting his eyes. And she ran. She didn't make it far. The guards caught her before she reached the outer courtyard. Hands grabbed her arms, yanked her backward with bruising force. She screamed, fought, clawed at them, drawing blood. But they were stronger, so much stronger. "No, let me go!" She kicked, twisted, managed to bite down hard on one guard's hand. He backhanded her across the face. Stars exploded in her vision, pain bloomed across her cheekbone. "Stupid Omega," he snarled, shaking his bleeding hand. "Should have known your place. Now you're going to learn it the hard way." They dragged her toward the holding cells beneath the keep. She could see the dark entrance ahead, stairs leading down into blackness. Fear clawed at her throat. "Wait!" Kalen's voice stopped them cold. He appeared at the top of the stone stairs, silhouetted against the torchlight. His expression was calm now. Eerily calm. That was worse than the anger, worse than the threats. "Let her go," he said. The guards hesitated, confused. "I said let her go." They released her. Isara stumbled, catching herself against the wall. Her cheek throbbed where the guard had hit her. She could taste blood. Kalen descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. The crowd had followed, eager to see what would happen. They formed a semicircle, watching like spectators at an execution. When Kalen reached her, he leaned in close, his breath cold against her ear. "Run, little Omega," he whispered. "Run as far as you can. I'll give you 3 hours. 3 hours to disappear into the forest. And then I'll release my hunters, my soldiers, my hounds. And when they find you, and they will, I will make your death last for days. I will make you regret every second of this humiliation you've caused me. You'll beg me to make it quick. But I won't. I want you to die knowing that you could have lived, that all you had to do was obey." He stepped back, gesturing to the guards. "Open the gate." "My lord," one of them protested. "She's a fugitive." "Open it." The guards exchanged glances, then obeyed. The heavy iron gate groaned open, revealing the dark forest beyond. Snow had started to fall. Isara didn't wait. She bolted into the night, bare feet slapping against cold stone, then dirt, then snow. Behind her she heard Kalen's voice, casual and cold. 3 hours. Then release the hounds. I want her alive when you find her. Broken, but alive. Laughter echoed through the courtyard. Isara ran faster, ignoring the pain in her feet, the cold biting into her skin. The forest swallowed her whole. The storm hit an hour later. She'd made it deep into the forest by then, following animal trails, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her ceremonial gown was torn to shreds by branches and thorns. Her feet left bloody prints in the snow. The wind picked up suddenly, howling through the trees. Snow fell harder, faster, until she could barely see 3 feet ahead. The temperature dropped. She had no coat, no shoes, no supplies, just survival instinct. Keep moving. If you stop, you die. But her body was giving out. Every step was agony. Her feet were numb, then on fire, then numb again. Her vision blurred. The trees seemed to spin around her. She couldn't tell which direction she was going anymore. North? South? Did it even matter? She stumbled, fell, got up. Fell again. The cold seeped into her bones. Her fingers wouldn't move properly. Her thoughts were getting fuzzy. Just rest, just for a minute. No. That's how you died. She'd heard stories of people freezing to death. They said you got tired first, then warm, then you just went to sleep and never woke up. She forced herself up again, took another step, another. She collapsed near a frozen stream, gasping, shivering so violently her teeth chattered. The snow piled up around her, covering her legs, her arms. The world dimmed at the edges. This is it, she thought distantly. This is how I die. Alone in the snow. At least Kalen won't get the satisfaction of killing me himself. At least I denied him that. But then she heard footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, crunching through the snow. A shadow loomed over her. "Stupid girl," a low voice muttered. "What the hell were you thinking?" Strong arms lifted her off the ground. She tried to fight, but she had nothing left. Her limbs wouldn't obey. Everything hurt. "Relax," the voice said. Gruff, but not unkind. "I'm not going to hurt you, but you're going to owe me for this." "Who?" Her voice cracked. Came out as barely a whisper. "Name's Kyle, and you just made the worst decision of your life running out here without gear." She wanted to argue, wanted to say that the worst decision would have been staying, marrying Kalen, dying 3 months from now with poison burning through her veins. But the darkness swallowed her whole before she could form the words. She woke to warmth. Fire. Crackling, bright, close enough to feel on her skin without burning. Isara opened her eyes slowly, blinking against the light. She was lying on a rough woolen blanket near a stone hearth. The room was small, one room really, with wooden walls, a low ceiling, and a single shuttered window. A cabin. Rough built but solid, the kind of place someone built to survive, not to impress. Every part of her body ached. Her feet felt like they were on fire as sensation returned to them, pins and needles stabbing through flesh. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through her ribs. Easy. She turned her head, wincing at the movement. A man sat near the fire, sharpening a knife. He was older than Kalen, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a rough tie, a scarred jaw, and eyes the color of slate. He didn't look at her as he worked, the blade making a steady shick, shick, shick sound against the wet stone. There were scars on his hands. Old ones. The kind you got from fighting, not accidents. "Where am I?" Isara's throat was raw, like she'd swallowed glass. "My cabin, about 20 miles northwest of Blackstone. You're lucky I found you when I did. Another hour and you'd be frozen solid. Why did you... save you?" He glanced up, one eyebrow raised. "Honestly, I'm still asking myself that. I don't make a habit of rescuing half-frozen omegas in the middle of blizzards. Bad for my reputation." She pushed herself upright, gritting her teeth against the pain. Her hands were wrapped in clean bandages, her feet too. Someone had tended to her wounds while she was unconscious, changed her out of the ruined gown and into an oversized shirt that smelled like wood smoke and pine. "I need to keep moving," she said, looking around for her clothes. Not that they'd be much use. The gown had been shredded. "You need to stay put." He set the knife down, fixing her with a hard stare. "That storm's not letting up for another 2 days minimum. You go out there again, you'll die. And I didn't drag your frozen carcass all the way here just to watch you walk back out and finish the job." "I can't stay here. They're coming." "Who's coming?" "Hunters, soldiers, Kalen's men." Her voice shook. "He gave me 3 hours. That was... How long ago was that?" Kale glanced at the window. "Found you about 6 hours ago, so they're already out there probably. But they won't find you. Not in this weather. Even the best tracker can't follow a trail in a whiteout." "You don't understand. Kalen doesn't give up. He'll send everyone. He'll burn down every cabin, question every person." "Let him try." Kale's voice was flat. "This cabin's off the map. No roads lead here. No one knows about it except me. You're safe. For now." Isara wanted to believe him, but she'd seen what Kalen was capable of. "You don't know him." "I know his type." Kael leaned back against the wall. "Let me guess. You ran from a bonding ceremony. Someone important wanted to own you, and you told them no." She stared at him. "How did you... I know you were wearing a bonding gown when I found you. I know you're an Omega, and I know the only reason an Omega runs from a bonding ceremony is because the Alpha's a monster." He paused. "So yeah, I know enough." Isara looked away, jaw tight. "He was going to kill me. I saw it. When I touched him during the ceremony, I saw everything. His past, his plans, my death." Kyle went very still. "You saw the future?" "I don't know what I saw. Visions, memories, truth. But it was real. I know it was." "That's not normal." "I know." Omegas don't have powers like that. I know. She looked at her bandaged hands, trembling. I don't understand any of this. I've never had visions before, never had any kind of ability. I'm nothing. I'm nobody. You rejected an Alpha King in front of his entire court, Kael said quietly. That's not nothing. That was stupid. That was suicide. Maybe. But it was also brave. She laughed, bitter and sharp. Brave? I doomed my entire pack. Kalen threatened to burn our territory, to kill my family. Because of me. Because I was selfish. Were you? Kael asked. Selfish? Or did you refuse to let someone murder you? Isara didn't have an answer. Kael sighed, standing. He crossed to a small cabinet, pulling out a loaf of bread, dried meat, and a water skin. He set them on the table. Eat. You need your strength back. I told you I need to leave, and I told you you'll die out there. His voice was firm, not cruel, but unyielding. Look at yourself. You can barely sit up. Your feet are destroyed. You have no shoes, no coat, no supplies. Where exactly are you planning to go? She didn't have an answer for that either. That's what I thought. He sat back down. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to eat, you're going to rest. And when the storm clears, we'll figure out your next move. Together. Why would you help me? He was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind screamed, then, because no one helped me when I needed it, and I swore if I ever got the chance, I'd do better. There was something in his voice, something raw. What happened to you? Isara asked softly. That's a long story, and not one I'm ready to tell. He picked up the knife again, resumed sharpening. For now, just know that I understand what it's like to run, to be hunted, to have nowhere to go. Isara studied him, the scars, the hard edges, the way he kept his back to the wall, always watching the door. Thank you, she said quietly. He shrugged. Don't thank me yet. You're still alive, but that doesn't mean you're safe. Kalen's not going to give up. And when he comes, if he comes, this cabin won't stop him. 4 walls and a locked door mean nothing to an alpha who wants you dead or worse. I know. Do you? He looked at her sharply. Because I don't think you understand what you've started. Rejecting an alpha, especially one like Kalen Thorne, that's a declaration of war. You didn't just hurt his pride. You challenged his authority. And men like him, they don't forgive that. Ever. Then what am I supposed to do? Her voice cracked. Just give up? Let him win? No. Kael set the knife down. You fight. But you fight smart. You learn what you are, what that power inside you is. You get stronger, and then, when you're ready, you make him regret ever touching you. Isara stared at him. You really think I can do that? I think you already started. He nodded toward the door. You survived. That's more than most people can say. She picked up the bread, tearing off a piece. It was stale, but she didn't care. It tasted like hope. Up. The next 2 days passed slowly. Kael wasn't much of a talker, but he wasn't cruel either. He kept the fire going, brought her food, replaced her bandages. He didn't ask invasive questions, didn't push her to explain things she couldn't. In return, she stayed out of his way, recovering her strength. But something was changing inside her. She felt it most at night, when the cabin was quiet and Kael was asleep in the corner by the door. Always by the door, she noticed, like he was guarding it. A strange awareness, like a sixth sense waking up. She could feel his emotions, not read his mind exactly, but sense the shape of his thoughts. Anger, old and cold. Grief that had settled into his bones. Guilt that ate at him in the quiet moments. And beneath it all, something else, something protective. On the second night, she dreamed again. She was back in the Great Hall, but this time she wasn't alone. Kalen was there, but so were others. Dozens of people, all dead, all murdered by his hand or his order. She could see their faces, hear their screams, children, women, men who'd refused to bow. And at the center of it all, Kalen smiled. Not with pleasure, just cold satisfaction. You can't escape me, he said in the dream. I own you. I always have. She woke gasping, sweat-soaked despite the cold. Kael was already awake, sitting by the fire. He looked over at her. Nightmare? She nodded, not trusting her voice. You get used to them, he said quietly. Eventually. Something about the way he said it made her think he was speaking from experience, from his own nightmares. Kael, she said, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. What did you do before you came here? He stiffened. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer, thought she'd crossed a line. Then, I was a soldier, elite unit, did wet work for people who didn't want blood on their own hands. He poked at the fire with a stick. Assassinations, interrogations, things I'm not proud of. Hurt people who didn't deserve it, killed people who were just following orders same as me. And when I finally said no, when I finally walked away, they branded me a traitor and tried to put me down like a rabid dog. How did you escape? I didn't. Not really. He looked at the fire. Killed 3 of my former teammates on my way out. Good men, men I'd fought beside for years. But it was them or me, and I chose me. Been running ever since. Living out here, alone, trying to forget. I'm sorry, Isara said. Don't be. I made my choices. Now I live with them. He glanced at her. Same as you will. I saw things, she said suddenly, needing to tell someone. When I touched Kalen, during the ceremony, I saw what he'd done. Murders, betrayals. And I saw what he was going to do. To me, to others. I saw my own death, 3 months from now, poison. I died alone, and no one cared. Kael turned to face her fully. You saw the future? I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe just his intentions, his plans. But it felt real. As real as you and me sitting here right now. That's not a normal Omega trait. I know that. Have you ever had visions before? Anything like this? No. Never. I'm not special. I'm nobody. The weakest Omega in my pack. My father used to tell me I was worthless. That my only value was in who I could be sold to. Kael frowned, thinking hard. Omegas don't develop powers out of nowhere. Not like this. Which means either you were always gifted and it was dormant, or what? Or you're not just an Omega. Maybe you're something else. Something more. The words hung in the air between them. Isara's stomach twisted. That's impossible. I've been tested. I know what I am. Tests can be wrong. Or manipulated. Kael leaned forward. Think about it. What if your pack knew? What if your father knew you had potential, and he suppressed it? Kept you weak, kept you thinking you were nothing, so he could use you? She wanted to say it was crazy, but was it? Her father had never shown her kindness, had never treated her like family. Just a burden, just merchandise. There's someone who might know, Kael said. An old scholar, lives up north in the borderlands. She studies bloodlines, ancient abilities. If anyone can tell you what you are, it's her. You'd take me there. I said I'd help you figure this out. He shrugged. Besides, sitting in this cabin waiting for Kalen's men to show up isn't much of a plan. Isara felt something warm bloom in her chest. Hope. Actual hope. Thank you, Kael. Save your thanks. We're not out of the woods yet, literally. He stood, moving to the window. Storm should break by tomorrow. We'll leave at first light. Pack light, move fast. It's a 3-day journey if we push hard. What if they find us? Then we fight. I don't know how to fight. Kael smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't bitter. Then I'll teach you. Well, on the 3rd morning, the storm finally broke. Kael woke her before dawn. Time to move. She sat up, wincing. Her body still ached, but the rest had helped. She could walk now without wanting to scream. He'd laid out supplies on the table. A coat, too big for her, but warm. Boots lined with fur, dried food, a water skin, and a knife. You know how to use that? He asked, nodding at the knife. No, you will by the time we get there. He handed it to her. Never go anywhere unarmed, ever. Even if you're just walking to the stream. Understand? She nodded, tucking the knife into her belt. They were ready to leave when Kael suddenly stopped, head tilted, listening. What? Isara whispered. Quiet. He moved to the window, peering through a crack in the shutters. His whole body went rigid. How many? Isara's heart raced. 3, maybe 4. He grabbed his sword from the corner. Stay behind me. Kael, I said stay behind me. Before she could argue, the door exploded inward. Wood splintered. Hinges shrieked. 3 wolves burst into the cabin, Kalen's enforcers dressed in black and silver. The lead one was tall, scarred, with yellow eyes that fixed on Isara immediately. "Found you," he said, grinning. "The king's going to be pleased." Kael was already moving. He grabbed a knife from the table and hurled it in one fluid motion. It spun through the air and buried itself in the enforcer's shoulder. The man screamed, stumbling back, blood pouring. The other 2 lunged. Kyle fought like something unleashed, fast, brutal, efficient. He blocked a punch, drove his elbow into one enforcer's face with a sickening crack, kicked the other's knee hard enough that something popped. But there were too many, and they were trained. One of them slammed Kyle into the wall hard enough to crack the wood. His sword clattered to the floor. The 3rd enforcer turned toward Isara, grinning. "Come quietly, Omega, and this doesn't have to get messy." Isara backed against the far wall. Nowhere to run. Nowhere to hide. The enforcer stepped closer, pulling out rope. "The Alpha King wants you back. Alive, preferably. But he didn't say you had to be in one piece, so if you make this difficult..." Fear coursed through her veins like ice. But beneath it, something else. That same awareness she'd felt when she touched Kalen. Rising up like a wave building before it crashed. "Stay away from me," she said. Her voice wasn't her own. It was deeper, resonant, filled with something ancient and powerful. The enforcer froze mid-step. His eyes went wide, pupils dilating, glassy, unseeing. He staggered backward, clutching his head with both hands. What are you—" His words came out strangled. He was seeing something terrible. His face twisted in absolute horror. No, that can't be." Then he collapsed, unconscious before he hit the floor. Silence. Dead silence. The other enforcer, the one fighting Kyle, spun toward her, shock and fear written across his face. "She's a—" Kale didn't give him a chance to finish. He drove his fist into the man's temple with brutal efficiency, and the enforcer crumpled. More silence. Just breathing. Heavy breathing. Kale turned to Isara slowly, eyes wide, blood on his knuckles. What the hell was that? She stared at her hands. They were trembling, glowing faintly with something she couldn't name. "I don't know." He crossed the room in 3 strides, gripping her shoulders. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to ground her. "Listen to me. Whatever you just did, that's not normal. That's not Omega instinct or adrenaline. That's power. Real, genuine power. I didn't mean to—" "Kalen knows." Kayla's voice was urgent, fierce. "He knows what you are. That's why he wanted you. Not for an alliance. Not to pay off debts. For this. For whatever ability is waking up inside you right now. And now that you've rejected him, now that you've escaped, he's going to hunt you down and take it by force. He'll break you. Control you. Turn you into a weapon." "What am I?" Her voice broke. "What's happening to me?" "I don't know, but we're going to find out." He released her, moving quickly. "Grab your things. We need to move. Now. Where there's 3, there's more. They're probably circling the area." Isara grabbed the pack, her hands still shaking. Kyle was already dragging the bodies toward the back room. "Can't leave evidence. If they don't report back, Kalen will send more. Maybe buy us a day." She watched him work, efficient and cold. This wasn't the first time he'd dealt with bodies. "Kyle? Yeah? Thank you. For not running. For not turning me over." He paused, looking back at her. For a moment his expression softened, just slightly. "You saved my life just now," he said quietly, "whether you know it or not. That enforcer would have killed me if you hadn't stopped him. So we're even." He grabbed his pack. "Besides, I've been running alone for too long. Maybe it's time I stopped." Isara felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. "No time for that now." "What do we do?" she asked. "Now?" Kale checked his weapons, securing knives at his belt, his sword across his back. "Now we run. But not blind, not scared. We run with purpose. We find that scholar. We figure out what you are. And then—" He looked at her, something fierce in his gaze. "Then we make Kalen Thorne regret the day he ever heard your name." Isara straightened, feeling something shift inside her. Not just fear anymore. Not just survival. determination. "Let's go," she said. They slipped out the back of the cabin into the pale dawn light. The snow had stopped, but the cold was bitter. Kael led the way, moving fast but careful, checking for tracks, for signs of more enforcers. Isara followed, knife in hand, every sense alert. Behind them, the cabin disappeared into the trees. Ahead of them, an uncertain future. But for the first time since that terrible moment in the Great Hall, Isara wasn't just running away. She was running toward something, toward answers, toward power, toward becoming someone Kaelin Thorne would learn to fear. They traveled north through terrain that wanted them dead. The forest gave way to rocky hills, then to wind-scarred plateaus where nothing grew except twisted shrubs that clawed at their clothes. The cold was relentless, not the clean cold of winter snow, but the kind that got into your bones and stayed there, making every breath hurt. Kael set a brutal pace. They walked from before dawn until after dark, stopping only when Isara's legs threatened to give out completely. He taught her as they moved, how to read tracks, how to find water, how to move quietly, how to hold the knife so she wouldn't drop it if someone grabbed her wrist. "Lower," he said on the second day, adjusting her grip. "You're holding it like you're cutting vegetables. Someone comes at you, you need to be ready to drive it up under the ribs. Quick, hard, no hesitation." Isara's hand shook. "I don't think I can." "You can. You will. Because the alternative is Kaelin's dungeon." His eyes were hard. "You think those enforcers at the cabin were going to be gentle? You think they were going to take you back and give you a nice room and 3 meals a day?" She swallowed. "No." "Then learn." By the 4th day, her feet had hardened. The blisters had scabbed over. Her hands stopped trembling when she held the knife. But the nightmares got worse. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Kaelin, saw the hall, saw the deaths, past and future, playing out in vivid detail. She'd wake gasping, and Kael would be there, silent, handing her water. He never asked about the dreams, never pushed. On the 5th day, they reached the borderlands. The landscape changed abruptly. One moment they were walking through sparse forest. The next they emerged onto a vast plain of gray stone and dead grass. In the distance, mountains rose like jagged teeth against a slate sky. "That's where we're going?" Isara asked, staring at the peaks. "Just beyond them. The scholar, her name's Marin, lives in a valley on the other side. Used to be part of an old pack settlement before the wars. Now it's just her and whoever's desperate enough to seek her out. What kind of person lives alone in a place like this?" "The kind who has her reasons." Kael adjusted his pack. "Fair warning, she's not friendly. Don't expect warm welcomes or explanations that make sense. She speaks in riddles half the time. But if anyone can tell you what's happening to you, it's her." They made camp that night in the ruins of what had once been a watchtower. 3 walls still stood, providing some shelter from the wind. Kael built a small fire, just enough for warmth. Isara sat close to the flames, trying to stop shivering. "Can I ask you something?" "You just did." "Why did you really help me? Back at the cabin, you could have left me in the snow." Kael was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was low. "I told you, no one helped me when I needed it. There's more to it than that." He looked at her then, really looked. "You remind me of someone I failed." "Who?" "My sister." The words came out rough, like they hurt. "She was an Omega too, sweet kid. Believed the best in people even when they showed her otherwise. Our pack promised her to an alpha from a neighboring territory. Political marriage, same as yours. She didn't want to go, but she did anyway because she thought it was her duty." Isara's chest tightened. "What happened?" "He killed her, 3 months after the wedding. Made it look like an accident, but I knew. Everyone knew. They just didn't care." His jaw clenched. "I tried to get justice. Tried to challenge him. My own pack exiled me for it. Said I was causing trouble, threatening the alliance, so I left. Joined the military. Became someone who could hurt the people who hurt others. But it was too late for her." "I'm sorry," Isara whispered. "Don't be sorry, just survive." He poked at the fire. "That's all she would have wanted, for someone like her to make it out." They sat in silence after that. The wind howled through the broken walls. Isara felt the power stirring inside her again. That strange awareness. She could sense Kael's grief like a physical weight, heavy and old. And beneath it, something else. A fierce, protective determination. He meant what he said. He was going to help her survive. No matter what, the thought should have comforted her. Instead, it terrified her. Because if Kaelin found them, Kael would fight, and he would die. She couldn't let that happen. Kael, she said quietly, when we find this scholar, when I figure out what I am, I'm going back. He looked up sharply. Back where? To Blackstone, to face Kaelin. That's suicide. Maybe. But I can't run forever, and I can't let him keep doing this, using people, killing them when they're no longer useful. If I have power, if I'm something more than just an Omega, then I need to use it. You don't even know what you're capable of yet. Then I'll learn, fast. She met his eyes. You taught me to hold a knife. Marin can teach me to use whatever this is inside me. And then I'm going to make Kaelin answer for what he's done. Not just to me, to everyone. Kael studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. You've got guts, I'll give you that. Is that a yes? You'll help me. I'll help you train. I'll help you survive. But I'm not letting you walk into Blackstone alone. We do this. We do it smart. Together. Together, Isara agreed. The fire crackled between them, and for the first time she felt like she had an ally. A real one. But the feeling didn't last. The next morning, they were ambushed. It happened fast. They were crossing a narrow pass between two cliffs when arrows rained down from above. Kael shoved Isara behind a boulder just as one whistled past her ear. Bandits, he shouted, drawing his sword. Or Kaelin's men! Does it matter? Stay down! But she could already feel them. 6, no, 7, minds pressing against her awareness. Hungry, desperate. Not soldiers. Bandits, then. Probably watching the pass for easy targets. Kael engaged the first two who came down the rocks. His sword flashed in the gray light. One bandit went down immediately, throat opened. The other lasted longer, but not by much. The rest hesitated. Then one of them spotted Isara. An Omega! He called out, grinning. Alone! We can sell her in the southern markets. 3 of them broke away from Kael, rushing toward her position. Isara's heart hammered. She fumbled for the knife at her belt. Kael had taught her the basics, but she'd never actually used it on a person. Never had to. The first bandit reached her, grabbing for her arm. Instinct took over. She drove the knife upward, just like Kael had shown her, felt resistance, felt it sink into flesh. The bandit's eyes went wide. He staggered back, blood spreading across his shirt. She'd stabbed him. She'd actually stabbed someone. The knife fell from her trembling hands. The second bandit was on her before she could react. He slammed her against the boulder, knocking the air from her lungs. His breath was hot and foul on her face. Pretty thing, he snarled. You'll fetch a good price, but maybe I'll sample the goods first. Something inside Isara snapped. The power surged up like a tidal wave, uncontrolled and furious. Her vision went white. She felt the bandit's mind, felt his thoughts, his memories, his darkest fears. And she grabbed hold of them, twisted. The bandit screamed. It wasn't a normal scream. It was raw terror, primal and absolute. He threw himself backward, clawing at his own face, at his eyes, trying to escape something only he could see. He ran, straight toward the cliff edge, didn't stop, went over. His scream cut off with a wet crunch. Silence. The remaining bandits were backing away, eyes wide, weapons lowered. Witch, one of them whispered. She's a witch. They ran. Kael finished off the last one who'd stayed to fight, then turned to Isara. She was still pressed against the boulder, breathing hard, staring at her hands. They were glowing again, brighter this time, almost blinding. Isara, she couldn't look at him. I killed him. I made him jump. I didn't mean to, but I felt his mind, and I couldn't stop it. Isara, look at me. She forced herself to meet his eyes. You saved our lives, Kael said firmly. That's all that matters. You hear me? You did what you had to do. But I didn't have to make him. Yes, you did. Because if you hadn't, he would have done exactly what he said. and then he would have sold you or killed you. Kale gripped her shoulders. This is what power is. It's ugly, it's brutal, and it doesn't care about your intentions. You have to learn to control it before it controls you. She nodded, swallowing hard. Kale released her, looking around at the bodies. We need to move. If there were 7 here, there might be more nearby. They gathered their things quickly and left the pass behind. Neither of them spoke for hours. That night, camped in another set of ruins, Isara couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the bandit's face, heard his scream, watched him fall. It doesn't get easier, Kyle said quietly from across the fire. What? Taking a life, it doesn't get easier. Anyone who says it does is lying or broken. But you learn to carry it. You learn to live with it. How many have you killed? He was quiet for a long moment. I stopped counting after 20. Isara shuddered. But here's the thing, Kyle continued. Every single one of those deaths bought someone else's life. Maybe not directly, maybe not obviously. But that's what soldiers tell themselves to sleep at night, that the bad we do prevents worse from happening. Do you believe that? Some days. He poked at the fire. Other days, I think we're all just making excuses for being monsters. You're not a monster. He looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. Neither are you. Remember that, no matter what that power makes you do. 2 days later, they reached the mountains. The path was treacherous. Narrow trails carved into sheer cliff faces, loose stones that shifted underfoot, bridges made of rotting rope and hope. Isara's fear of heights became intimately familiar with reality. Don't look down, Kale advised as they crossed one particularly terrifying bridge. That's not helpful. Would you prefer I tell you it's about a 300-foot drop to the rocks below? No. He laughed, actually laughed. It was the first time she'd heard it, and despite her terror, it made her smile. They were halfway across when the rope snapped. Not the whole bridge, just one of the support lines. But it was enough. The bridge tilted violently. Isara screamed, grabbing for the handrail. Her feet slipped on the wet wood. Kale lunged forward, catching her wrist. I've got you. The bridge is breaking. I know. Move. Fast. They scrambled across as more rope snapped behind them. Isara's boots hit solid ground just as the entire bridge gave way, crashing down into the gorge below. She collapsed on the stone, breathing hard, heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Kale sat beside her, equally winded. Well, that was exciting. You have a strange definition of exciting. Welcome to the borderlands. Everything here wants to kill you. You get used to it. I really don't think I will. But she did. Slowly. Day by day, the impossible became routine. The terrifying became manageable. She learned to trust her feet, her instincts, her growing awareness of the world around her, and the power grew stronger. She could feel people now from a distance, could sense their emotions, their intentions. When they passed a group of travelers on a mountain path, she knew immediately they meant no harm. When they camped near an abandoned outpost, she felt the wrongness before Kyle spotted the tracks. A predator, something big, circling in the dark. They moved on. On the 8th day, they descended into the valley. It was nothing like Isara expected. Instead of desolation, she saw green, actual green. A small forest of twisted pines, a stream cutting through the center, and at the heart of it all, a cottage. Stone walls, thatched roof, smoke rising from a chimney. That's it? Isara asked. That's it. They approached slowly. Kyle's hand rested on his sword hilt. Isara could feel someone inside the cottage. One person, old, powerful in a way she couldn't quite define. Before they reached the door, it opened. An old woman stood in the doorway. She was small, hunched, with silver hair in a long braid and eyes so pale they were almost white. She looked at them, really looked, like she was seeing straight through skin and bone to something deeper. Took you long enough, she said, her voice raspy but strong. I've been expecting you for 3 days. Kale stepped forward. Marin, I need your help. Obviously. Why else would you drag an untrained seer through the mountains in winter? The old woman's gaze fixed on Isara. Come here, girl. Let me look at you. Isara approached hesitantly. Marin reached out, gnarled fingers gripping Isara's chin, tilting her face side to side. Then she grabbed Isara's hand, running her thumb over the palm. Her eyes widened.
Well, she said softly, aren't you interesting? What is she? Kael asked.
Marin released Isara, stepping back. Not here. Inside. We have much to discuss, and I don't fancy advertising to every tracker within 10 miles that I'm harboring fugitives. The cottage interior was cluttered with books, herbs, strange objects Isara couldn't name. It smelled like sage and old paper. Marin gestured for them to sit at a rough wooden table. Tell me everything, she said. Start from the beginning. Isara told her. The bonding ceremony. The vision when she touched Kaelin. The rejection. The flight. The enforcers at the cabin. The bandits in the pass. Everything. Marin listened without interrupting. When Isara finished, the old woman was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. You're a truth seer, she said finally. A what? Truth seer, oracle, prophet. Different cultures have different names, but the ability is the same. You see truth, past, present, future, depending on your strength. When you touched the Alpha King, you saw his truth, his past crimes, his future intentions, and you'll only get stronger. Isara's stomach dropped. But I'm an Omega. Omegas don't... You're not just an Omega, Marin interrupted. You're descended from the old bloodlines. The original packs, before the hierarchies calcified into what they are now. Back then, seers were common, valued. They guided packs, prevented disasters, exposed liars and traitors. But as the Alphas consolidated power, seers became threats. They could see through manipulation, couldn't be controlled. So they were hunted, killed, bred out of the population. Your line should have died out centuries ago. But it didn't, Kael said. Clearly. Marin looked at Isara. Somewhere in your ancestry, the gift survived. Dormant, perhaps, for generations, waiting for the right catalyst. Kaelin, Isara whispered, touching him triggered it. Trauma often does. Your ability woke up to protect you, and now that it's awake, it won't go back to sleep. Marin stood moving to a shelf. She pulled down a leather-bound book, ancient and worn. The question is, what will you do with it? I want to learn to control it, to use it. To use it against the Alpha King who tried to own you, Marin said, not a question. Yes. Foolish, brave, typical seer stubbornness. The old woman opened the book. Training will take time, months at least. Truth-seeing is dangerous. If you push too hard, you'll lose yourself in the visions. See everything. Go mad from it. I've watched it happen. I don't have months, Isara said. Kaelin won't stop hunting me, and the longer I run, the more people get hurt because of me. Then you'd better learn fast. Marin's pale eyes gleamed. But understand, this training will break you down before it builds you up. You'll see things you don't want to see, know things you wish you didn't. Are you prepared for that? Isara thought of the bandit falling from the cliff, of the enforcer collapsing in the cabin, of Kaelin's smile as he ordered her death. Yes, she said, I'm prepared. Marin smiled, thin and sharp. We'll see about that. The training started immediately. Marin led Isara to a clearing behind the cottage. The old woman moved with surprising speed for someone her age. Sit, she commanded, pointing to a flat stone in the center of the clearing. Isara sat. Close your eyes. Focus inward. You've been letting the power use you. Now you're going to learn to use it. How? By doing the hardest thing a seer ever does, looking at yourself. Your own truth, your own past, present, future. No filters, no lies you tell yourself to sleep at night. Everything. Isara's breath caught. I don't... Do it. She closed her eyes. At first, nothing happened, just darkness. Her own thoughts, scattered and anxious. Then the vision started. She saw herself as a child, crying alone in her room while her father entertained guests downstairs. Saw the moment she realized he would never love her. Saw every time she'd been told she was worthless, disposable, nothing. She saw her mother, barely remembered, dying when Isara was 5. Saw her father's relief. One less mouth to feed, one less weakness to worry about. She saw her future. Multiple paths branching and splitting. In one, she died in the mountains, frozen and alone. In another, Kaelin caught her, and she spent years in his dungeon before he finally killed her. In another, she made it to Blackstone, confronted him, and was executed publicly as an example. But in one path, narrow, fragile, barely visible, she lived. She stood in the Great Hall again, but this time she wasn't afraid. She was powerful. And Kalen was the one on his knees. The vision shattered. Isara gasped, falling forward. Marin caught her. "Easy," the old woman said. "What did you see?" "Everything, too much." Isara's voice shook. "I saw myself die. Multiple times." "Did you see yourself live?" "Yes. Once. Maybe." "Then that's the path you need to find. Every choice from here forward either leads you toward that future or away from it." Marin helped her stand. That's what truth-seeing is. Not just seeing what is, but seeing what could be. And making the choices that shape reality toward the outcome you want. That's impossible. Only if you believe it is. Marin's grip tightened. Again, sit, look deeper. They trained until Isara couldn't stand anymore, until her mind was raw and exhausted, until she collapsed in the dirt, shaking. Kael carried her back to the cottage. "You're pushing her too hard," he said to Marin. "She asked for this. She's going to burn out. Better to burn out in training than in battle." Marin's eyes were hard. "The Alpha King will show no mercy. Why should I?" Over the next week, the pattern repeated. Marin pushed. Isara broke, rebuilt, pushed again. She learned to control the visions, to summon them instead of being ambushed, to look at a person and see their truth without losing herself in it. She learned to project, to make others see what she saw. That's what she'd done to the bandit, though uncontrolled. Now she practiced it deliberately, making Kael see harmless illusions, a bird, a flower, his own reflection. And she learned to shield, to hide her mind from other seers, other abilities. Marin tested her ruthlessly, trying to break through, to see Isara's thoughts. At first, she failed every time, but slowly, painfully, she got better. On the 10th day, something changed. They were in the clearing again. Marin was pushing at Isara's mental shields, trying to crack them. Isara was holding firm, sweat dripping down her face from the effort. Then Marin attacked differently. Instead of pushing, she pulled, tried to yank Isara's consciousness out of her body, into a vision. Isara felt the pull, felt herself starting to slip. No. She grabbed the power inside her, shaped it, and pushed back. Marin staggered, eyes wide. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the old woman laughed. Actually laughed, loud and delighted. "There it is," she said. "There's the strength. You're not just defensive anymore. You can attack. I didn't mean to—" "Yes, you did. Deep down, you knew what I was doing, and you responded. Good. You're learning." Marin's expression turned serious. "But you're still not ready." "For what?" "For him, Kalen Thorne. He's powerful in his own right, brutal, experienced. You can see his truth, expose his lies, but that won't matter if he kills you before you get the chance." "Then what do I do?" Marin looked at Kael, who'd been watching silently. "She needs to learn to fight. Really fight. Not just visions and mental games. Physical combat. Because when she faces Kalen, it won't be from a distance. It'll be up close. Personal." Kael nodded. "I can teach her that." And so the training split. Mornings with Marin, learning to wield her seer abilities. Afternoons with Kael, learning to wield a blade. He was merciless. "Faster!" he barked as she swung at him. "You're telegraphing every move. I can see it coming a mile away." She adjusted, tried again. Better. Again. They sparred until her arms ached, until her legs shook, until she could barely hold the practice sword. "Enough," Kael finally said. "You're getting sloppy." Isara collapsed on the ground, breathing hard. "How am I supposed to fight someone like Kalen? He's twice my size, 10 times stronger." "You don't fight him strength against strength. You fight smart. Use your abilities to predict his moves. Stay ahead of him, wear him down, make him angry. Angry fighters make mistakes. And if that doesn't work, then you go for the throat and hope you're fast enough." Kael sat beside her. "But it won't come to that. You're stronger than you think. I've seen it. I don't feel strong. No one ever does. That's the secret no one tells you. Strength isn't a feeling. It's a choice. You choose to keep going even when everything in you says to quit." That's strength. Isara looked at him. Where'd you learn that? The hard way. He stood, offering her his hand. Come on, one more round, then we're done for the day. She took his hand, let him pull her up. They sparred again, and this time she landed a hit. Just one. Just a glancing blow to his shoulder. But Kael grinned. There it is. You're getting it. That night, Isara dreamed of Blackstone again. But this time, she wasn't running. She was walking through the great hall, head high, while everyone stared. Kaelin stood at the far end, silver eyes wide with something she'd never seen before. Fear. She woke before dawn, heart racing, but not from terror, from anticipation. She was getting stronger, faster, more controlled, and soon, very soon, she'd be ready. But fate had other plans. On the 15th day, while Isara was training with Marin, Kael burst into the clearing. We have to go, he said, voice tight. Now. What's wrong? Isara asked. Soldiers. Kaelin's men. At least 20, maybe more. They're searching the valley, house by house. They'll be here within the hour. Marin cursed. They found us faster than I expected. Someone must have talked. Can we fight them? Isara asked. 20 soldiers? Kael shook his head. We'd be slaughtered. We need to run. No, Isara said quietly. They both turned to look at her. No more running, she continued, standing. I'm tired of running, tired of hiding. If they're here, if they've come this far, then we make a stand. That's suicide, Kael said flatly. Maybe. Or maybe it's time to show Kaelin what I've become. She looked at Marin. You said I'm getting stronger. Am I strong enough to face 20 soldiers? Not in a straight fight, Marin said slowly. But if you use your abilities strategically, then we have a chance. Kael grabbed her shoulders. Isara, listen to me. This isn't like the bandits. These are trained soldiers. If you fail, if your power falters for even a second, they will kill you. I know. She met his eyes. But I'm not the scared girl who ran from the Great Hall anymore. I'm something else now. Something Kaelin didn't expect, and it's time he learned that. Marin studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. If you're going to do this, we do it smart. We use the terrain, we use traps, and we use every ounce of power you have. Tell me what to do, Isara said. The old woman smiled. Oh, child, I'm going to teach you how to make an entire battalion see their worst nightmares, and then we're going to watch them tear each other apart. The plan came together in minutes, brutal and simple. Marin moved through her cottage like a storm, gathering vials and pouches, muttering instructions. The valley has 3 entry points. They'll split their forces, try to surround us. We use that against them. How? Kael was already checking his weapons, face grim. The North Pass is narrow. We collapse it, trap half their force on the wrong side. The old woman thrust a clay bottle into Isara's hands. This goes on the support rocks. When I give the signal, you break it. The fumes will eat through stone in seconds. Isara stared at the bottle. You've been preparing for this. I've been preparing for 40 years, girl. You don't live alone in the borderlands without making contingencies. Marin turned to Kael. The south approach has that ravine. Can you rig a tripwire? Already thinking about it. Good. That leaves the eastern trail. That's where they'll send their main force. She looked at Isara. That's where you'll make your stand. Isara's stomach twisted. Alone? Not alone. I'll be with you. But Kael needs to handle the south, and I need you to hold the east long enough for us to collapse their formation. Marin's pale eyes were hard. Can you do that? Every instinct screamed no. But Isara thought of the Great Hall, of Kaelin's smile, of the woman with auburn hair dying in a cell, of the future where she died poisoned and forgotten. Yes, she said. I can do it. Then move. We have maybe 30 minutes. They scattered. Kael disappeared toward the southern ravine, rope and blades in hand. Marin led Isara to the North Pass, showed her exactly where to place the bottle, then vanished into the trees to set her own traps. Isara found herself alone on the eastern trail, heart hammering, watching the tree line. The power inside her was already awake, sensing the approaching soldiers. 23 minds, she counted. Not 20. Disciplined. Focused. Hunting. and at the center of them, one mind burned brighter than the rest. Stronger, familiar. Her breath caught. Kalen was here, not just his soldiers. Him. He'd come himself. Terror clawed at her throat. She wasn't ready. Marin had said so. She was stronger, yes, but not strong enough to face him. Not yet. But there was no more time. The first soldiers appeared through the trees, 6 of them, moving in formation, weapons drawn. They spotted her immediately. "There!" one shouted. "The Omega!" They charged. Isara closed her eyes, reached for the power, and pulled. The world shifted. She felt their minds like candle flames, bright, vulnerable, easy to snuff out or twist. She grabbed hold of the nearest soldier's consciousness and showed him the truth. Not a lie, not an illusion. The truth of what he was doing, who he served, what Kalen had done to the last woman who'd trusted him. The soldier screamed, dropping his weapon, clawing at his eyes. "No, no, that's not—" The others hesitated, confused. Isara hit the second one, showed him his own future, dying in a ditch, forgotten, discarded by the king he served so loyally. Showed him the moment Kalen would order his execution for failing a mission. He fell to his knees, sobbing. The remaining 4 backed away, weapons raised but trembling. "What is she?" one whispered. "Demon," another hissed. "She's a demon." "I'm something worse," Isara said, and her voice carried power now, resonant and terrible. "I'm the truth you've been running from." She reached for all 4 at once. This was harder. She felt the strain immediately, like lifting weights too heavy for her arms. But she pushed through, showing them everything. Kalen's murders, his lies, the innocents buried in unmarked graves, the children killed to silence witnesses. 3 of them broke, turned and ran, screaming. The 4th, stronger-willed, more loyal, raised his sword and charged. Isara didn't have time to react. A blade flashed from the trees. The soldier went down, Kael's knife buried in his throat. Kael materialized beside her, breathing hard. "South approach is rigged. How many more?" "At least 15. Maybe more." She was shaking, exhausted already. "Kael, he's here. Kalen. He came himself." Kael cursed viciously. "Then we're not just fighting soldiers. We're fighting an Alpha King. I know." "Can you handle him?" "I don't know." Before Kael could respond, Marin's voice echoed through the valley. Not spoken, but felt. A mental pulse that made Isara's teeth ache. "Now. North Pass. Do it now." Isara ran. She reached the North Pass in seconds, found the bottle where she'd placed it, and hurled it against the support rocks. The clay shattered. Fumes hissed out, black and acrid, eating into stone like acid. The rocks groaned, then collapsed. Half the pass came down in a roar of dust and debris, cutting off the northern route completely. She heard shouts from the other side, soldiers trapped, unable to advance. One problem solved, but the eastern and southern routes were still open, and Kalen's main force was pushing through. She felt him before she saw him. His presence was like a weight on her mind, crushing and absolute. Not a seer, but powerful in a different way. Raw dominance, the kind of strength that bent people to his will through sheer force of personality. He emerged from the trees like a specter, silver eyes fixed on her. "There you are," Kalen said, voice calm, almost pleasant. "I was beginning to think you died in the mountains. That would have been disappointing." Isara's legs wanted to run. Every survival instinct screamed at her to flee, but she held her ground. "You shouldn't have come," she said, surprised her voice didn't shake. "And missed the chance to reclaim what's mine?" He smiled that cold, sharp smile. "You've caused me considerable trouble, little Omega, rejecting me, humiliating me in front of my court, killing my soldiers. Did you really think I'd let that stand? I'm not yours. I never was." "That's where you're wrong." He took a step closer. "From the moment your father signed that contract, you belong to me. Body, mind, and whatever strange little power you've developed." His eyes gleamed. "Yes, I know about that. My men described what you did to them. Very interesting. A truth seer. I haven't seen one of those in decades." "Then you know what I can do to you." "I know what you think you can do." Another step. "But here's the problem, Isara. You're untrained, unpracticed. You might have raw ability, but you don't have control. Not really. And against someone like me." He laughed.
You'll burn yourself out before you even scratch my shields. Want to test that theory? Absolutely. He moved. Faster than she expected. Faster than should have been possible. One moment he was 10 feet away, the next he was on her, hand closing around her throat, lifting her off the ground. Let's see what you've got, he whispered. Isara grabbed his wrist with both hands and pushed every ounce of power she had into him. She expected resistance, expected shields, mental barriers, something. Instead, she fell into his mind like dropping into an abyss. The visions hit like hammers. Murders, dozens of them, hundreds, women, men, children, anyone who stood in his way, anyone who knew too much, anyone who threatened his power. She saw his childhood, a boy beaten by his father, told he was worthless unless he was strong. She saw him kill his first man at 13, saw him smile afterward. She saw his rise to power, built on corpses and lies. Saw him orchestrate wars to consolidate territory. Saw him poison his own allies when they became inconvenient. And she saw his plans for her. Not death. Worse. He was going to break her, use her ability to root out traitors, expose enemies, maintain his grip on power, keep her locked in his palace, a tool he could wield whenever he needed. And when she inevitably burned out from overuse, when her mind finally shattered from seeing too much truth, he'd discard her like garbage. The vision should have terrified her. Instead, it made her furious. She grabbed hold of every horrible truth she'd seen and shoved it back at him. Not gently, not carefully, with all the rage of a girl who'd been told her entire life she was nothing. Kalen's eyes went wide. His grip on her throat loosened. She fell, gasping, but didn't stop. She kept pushing, kept showing him his own reflection, made him see himself as he truly was, not a king, not a conqueror, but a scared little boy who'd turned his pain into cruelty. He staggered backward, hands clutching his head. "Stop!" he growled. "Stop it!" "No." Isara stood, shaking, blood dripping from her nose. Using this much power was destroying her from the inside, but she didn't care. "You wanted to see what I could do, so look. Look at yourself. Look at what you are." For one beautiful moment, she saw fear in his eyes. Then his hand shot out, backhanding her across the face with enough force to send her sprawling. Pain exploded through her skull. Her vision went white, then dark, then slowly cleared. Kalen stood over her, breathing hard, face twisted with rage. "You little—" An arrow sprouted from his shoulder. He roared, spinning. Kyle stood at the tree line, bow in hand, already knocking another arrow. "Get away from her!" Kalen yanked the arrow out like it was nothing, blood streaming down his arm. "You. I should have known. Kale Draven, the traitor, still playing hero? Still breathing, which is more than I can say for most people who cross you." Kale loosed another arrow. Kalen dodged, impossibly fast, and charged. They collided like thunder. Kale's sword met Kalen's claws. The Alpha had shifted partially, hands elongating into lethal weapons. Metal screeched against bone and claw. Isara tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't hold. She'd pushed too hard, too fast. Her power was guttering like a dying candle. She watched helplessly as Kael fought. He was good, better than good. But Kalen was stronger, faster, and he fought with the brutal efficiency of someone who'd killed hundreds. Kael landed a solid hit, his blade slicing across Kalen's ribs. The Alpha barely flinched. "Is that all?" Kalen taunted, driving Kael back. "I expected better from you. I've got plenty left." But Kael was slowing, bleeding from a dozen cuts. Kalen was going to kill him. No. Isara reached deep, past the exhaustion, past the pain, to the core of her power. The part she hadn't touched yet because Marin had warned her it was dangerous, unstable. She touched it anyway. The world exploded into white light. Suddenly she wasn't just seeing one future, she was seeing all of them. Every possible outcome branching and splitting into infinity. Paths where Kael died, where she died, where they both died, and Kalen walked away victorious. But there, one thread, thin as spider silk but real, a path where they survived. She grabbed it and pulled reality toward it with everything she had left. The clearing shifted. Not physically, but something changed. The air, the light, the weight of possibility. Kalen's next strike, which should have taken Kael's head off, missed by inches. His foot caught on a root that hadn't been there a second ago. He stumbled.
Kale's blade found his throat. Not deep enough to kill, but enough to draw blood, enough to make a point. They froze, both breathing hard. "Yield," Kale said quietly, "or I finish it." Kalen's eyes flicked past him to Isara, still glowing with power she could barely control. For the first time, she saw something other than arrogance in his expression. Calculation. "This isn't over," he said. "It is for today." Kalen's laugh was cold. "You think you've won? You think killing me solves anything? I have an entire kingdom behind me. Armies, resources. You have a broken Omega and a traitor who's been running for years." He looked at Isara. "But I'll make you a deal." "We don't want your deals," Kyle said. "Shut up. I'm not talking to you." Kalen's eyes never left Isara's. "You want to stop running? You want to end this? Then come to the capital. Face me properly. Not out here in the wilderness where no one's watching. Come to Blackstone. Stand in the Great Hall. Challenge me in front of the Council of Alphas." "That's suicide," Kale said flatly. "Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way she gets what she wants." Kalen smiled, blood on his teeth. "Because here's the truth, little Omega. Kill me out here, and you're just a fugitive who murdered a king. You'll be hunted forever. But challenge me officially, with witnesses, with the old laws on your side. If you win, they have to accept it. You get legitimacy, power, everything you need to change the system that tried to destroy you." Isara stared at him. "Why would you offer that?" "Because I know you'll lose. You're strong. I'll give you that. Stronger than I expected. But you're not ready to face me in a true challenge. Not yet. And when you fail, when you die in front of everyone, it sends a message to every other Omega who thinks they can reject their betters." He pushed Kael's blade away from his throat. "Think about it. But don't take too long. I'll be waiting at Blackstone, 1 month. If you don't show, I'll come back here with an army and burn this entire valley to ash." He turned and walked away, one hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder. His soldiers, what was left of them, materialized from the trees, forming up around him. They retreated into the forest, leaving silence behind. Kael lowered his sword, turning to Isara. "Tell me you're not actually considering that." She didn't answer, couldn't. Her mind was spinning. Marin appeared from the shadows, looking ancient and tired. "He's right, you know, about the legitimacy. Kill him in secret and you're just another criminal. Challenge him properly and you force the entire kingdom to watch." "She's not ready," Kael said sharply. "No," Marin agreed. "She's not. But she could be. In a month, maybe." "Maybe isn't good enough. It's all we have." The old woman looked at Isara. "This is your choice, girl. No one can make it for you. Run and hide and live in fear, or stand and fight and maybe die. But at least die trying to change something." Isara thought of the vision she'd seen, the narrow path where she lived, where she stood in the Great Hall, not as a victim, but as something else. "I'm going," she said quietly. "Isara, I'm going," she repeated, stronger now. "Not because he challenged me, because he's right. This is the only way to end it. The only way to make sure other Omegas don't end up sold off like I was. If I run, nothing changes. If I fight and lose, at least I tried." Kyle looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he just sighed. "Then I guess we're going to Blackstone." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. You're not walking into that alone." He sheathed his sword. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't do anything stupid." "Too late for that," Marin muttered, but she was smiling slightly. "All right, 1 month to turn you from a raw seer into someone who can stand against an alpha king. Let's get to work." The next 4 weeks were the hardest of Isara's life. Marin pushed her past every limit, not just training her abilities, but forging them into weapons. She learned to strike fast and precise, to slip past mental shields, to project her visions with enough force to drop someone instantly. She learned to see multiple futures at once and choose the best path in real time. It gave her an edge in combat. Kael would attack, and she'd already know which way he'd move, dodging before the strike even landed. But it came at a cost. Her nose bled constantly. Headaches became her constant companion. Some mornings she woke up and didn't know where she was, lost in lingering visions. "You're burning too bright," Marin warned. "Keep this up and you'll burn out before you ever reach Blackstone." "Then teach me how not to." The old woman taught her control. How to ration her power,
use it in surgical strikes instead of overwhelming waves. How to shield her mind so completely that not even another seer could find her. And she taught her the most dangerous technique of all. It's called the unraveling, Marin explained one night, voice grave. You take someone's mind and you pull it apart, thread by thread, memory by memory, until there's nothing left but an empty shell. That's Isara felt sick. That's murder. Worse than murder. It's erasing someone from existence, their past, their self, everything they ever were. Marin's pale eyes were hard. I'm teaching you this not because I want you to use it, but because if Kaelin pushes you into a corner, if it's him or you, I need you to know you have this option. I won't use it. Then you'll die. There has to be another way. Maybe not, but you need to know it's there. The old woman grabbed her hand. Power without knowledge is weakness. You want to face him? You need every weapon available, even the ones that terrify you. Isara learned the technique, practiced it on plants first, then small animals, watching them stop mid-movement, blank and empty. It made her want to vomit, but she learned it anyway. Kael focused on the physical. Her sword work improved dramatically. She'd never be as strong as an alpha, but she was getting faster, more precise. And with her ability to see attacks before they landed, she had an advantage most fighters could never match. Good, Kael said after she disarmed him for the third time in a row. You're thinking 3 moves ahead. That's what wins fights. Will it be enough? Against regular soldiers? Absolutely. Against Kaelin? He was quiet. I don't know, but you've got a better shot than you did a month ago. 2 weeks before they were supposed to leave, a messenger arrived. A young wolf, barely more than a boy, stumbling into the valley, half frozen. He carried a sealed letter. Marin brought him to the cottage, fed him, warmed him, then took the letter. It was addressed to Isara. She broke the seal with trembling hands. The handwriting was elegant, formal. To the Omega who rejected a king, your challenge has been registered with the Council of Alphas. The date is set. The full moon, 1 month from the day you fled. The Great Hall of Blackstone will serve as neutral ground. You will face Kaelin Thorne in single combat, witnessed by all. If you win, you claim his title and territory. If you lose, your life is forfeit. The old laws have been invoked. There is no backing down. Failure to appear will be considered surrender, and Kaelin will be within his rights to hunt you to the ends of the earth. We await your arrival. The Council. Isara's hands shook. It's real. It's actually happening. There's more, the messenger said quietly. I wasn't supposed to tell you this, but he looked around nervously. The king. He's been preparing, training. He's brought in fighters from across the kingdom to spar with. He's taking you seriously. Good, Kael said flatly. He should be. After the messenger left, they sat in silence. You can still back out, Marin said. Disappear? I know places even Kaelin can't reach. No, Isara's voice was firm. I'm done running. The night before they left, Isara couldn't sleep. She stood outside the cottage, looking at the stars, trying to quiet her mind. But the visions kept coming. Possible futures, splitting and branching. In most of them, she died. Kaelin's claws around her throat, his blade through her heart, her body thrown to the crowd like garbage. But in one, that thin, fragile thread, she lived. And the world changed. Can't sleep either? She turned. Kael stood in the doorway, wrapped in his coat. Too many thoughts, she said. He came to stand beside her. They were quiet for a while, just breathing in the cold air. When I was in the military, Kael said eventually, before every major battle, I'd have this moment where I'd see all the ways I could die, all the things that could go wrong, and I'd be terrified. How did you deal with it? I didn't. I just went anyway. He looked at her. Fear doesn't go away, you just learn to move through it. That's all courage is, being scared and doing it anyway. What if I lose? Then you lose. But at least you tried. At least you didn't let him win by default. He put a hand on her shoulder. For what it's worth, I've seen a lot of fighters, a lot of so-called powerful people. And you? You're stronger than most of them, not because of your abilities, because of who you are. You could have stayed quiet, could have accepted your fate, but you didn't. That's real strength.
Isara felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you for everything, for not giving up on me. Someone should have done the same for my sister. I'm just glad I got the chance with you. They stood together in the cold, watching the stars. Tomorrow they would leave for Blackstone, for the great hall where it all began, for the challenge that would either free her or kill her. Isara took a deep breath and made herself a promise. Whatever happened, she would not go down quietly. She would make Kaelin work for it. And if she died, she'd take his secrets with her, broadcast them to everyone watching, so the whole kingdom knew what kind of monster wore a crown. The next morning, they set out. 3 days of hard travel brought them to Blackstone's borders. The forest gave way to farmland, then to villages, then to the sprawling city itself. People stared as they passed. Word had spread. The Omega who'd rejected the king was coming to challenge him. Some looked at her with hope, others with disgust, most with simple curiosity, like she was a spectacle, entertainment. They reached the palace gates at dusk. Guards stood at attention, clearly expecting them. The council is waiting. You're to proceed directly to the Great Hall. Isara's heart hammered. This was it. No more training, no more preparation. Just her and Kaelin and whatever happened next. Kael squeezed her shoulder once. You've got this. Marin had stayed behind, too old for the journey, but her final words echoed in Isara's mind. Remember, girl, truth is the sharpest weapon. Use it. They were escorted through corridors Isara remembered from before, past the same stone walls, the same tapestries. But this time she wasn't a frightened girl being led to slaughter. She was a weapon walking into battle. The doors to the Great Hall opened. It was packed. Hundreds of people, alphas from across the kingdom, betas, even a few other omegas watching with wide eyes. And at the far end, standing on the dais where they'd almost been bonded, Kaelin waited. He looked different, harder. His shoulder had healed from Kael's arrow, but there was a new tension in his posture. He was taking this seriously. The council sat in chairs arranged around the room, 7 ancient alphas who served as judges. One of them stood. Isara Vale, you have invoked the right of challenge under the old laws. Do you understand the terms? Her voice didn't shake. I do. Then step forward. She walked down the center aisle. Every eye followed her. She could feel their emotions, curiosity, contempt, hope, fear. A chaotic storm of feeling. She blocked it all out, focused only on Kaelin. He smiled as she approached. I wasn't sure you'd actually come. Here I am. Here you are. He descended from the dais. They stood facing each other, maybe 10 feet apart. Any last words before we begin? Isara took a breath. Then she did something crazy. She reached out with her power, not to attack, but to connect. And she broadcast what she'd seen in his mind to every single person in the room. The murders, the lies, the innocents killed, the corruption, everything. The hall erupted in gasps and shouts. Kaelin's eyes went wide with fury. You! They deserve to know, Isara said loudly. They deserve to see what you really are. The council was on their feet. What is the meaning of this? She's lying, Kaelin roared. These are tricks, illusions. Are they? One of the council members, an old female alpha with gray hair, was staring at Kaelin with horror. Because what I just saw, if even half of it is true. It's all true, Isara said. And I can prove it. Test me. Question me. I'll show you everything. Kaelin's face twisted. Enough. The challenge stands. Whatever games you're playing won't change the outcome. Then let's begin, Isara said. The room fell silent. One of the council members raised his hand. By the old laws, this challenge is witnessed and accepted. Combat will continue until one party yields or dies. Let it begin. Kaelin shifted. Not partially, fully. His body erupted into fur and muscle, bones cracking and reforming. In seconds, a massive silver wolf stood where the man had been, easily twice the size of a normal wolf, with eyes that glowed like molten metal. He growled, low and threatening. Isara didn't shift. Couldn't. She wasn't a fighter in that way. But she had other weapons. She reached for her power and prepared to fight for her life. The silver wolf lunged. Isara dove sideways, hitting the stone floor hard. Pain exploded through her shoulder, but she rolled and came up in a crouch. Kaelin's jaws snapped shut where her head had been a heartbeat before. She'd seen the attack coming.
3 futures splitting off, 2 where his teeth found her throat, 1 where she moved in time. She'd grabbed the third path and pulled herself toward it. But it took effort, concentration, and Kalen wasn't going to give her time to breathe. He circled, massive and predatory, claws clicking on stone. The crowd had pressed back against the walls, giving them space. No one spoke. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the sound of Kalen's growls and Isara's ragged breathing. She reached for her power, trying to slip into his mind like she had before. She hit a wall. Not a shield. Something worse. A void. Like trying to grab smoke. His wolf form was pure instinct, pure aggression. There was nothing to latch onto, no consciousness to twist or manipulate. He'd planned for this, shifted specifically to lock her out. Smart, she muttered, backing away as he advanced, but not smart enough. If she couldn't attack his mind directly, she'd attack everything around him. She reached out to the crowd instead. Hundreds of minds, all watching, all waiting. She grabbed the nearest ones, alphas sitting in the front rows, and showed them a vision. Kalen standing over a child's body. Blood on his hands, the child's mother screaming. Kalen's soldiers dragging her away while he watched, expression blank. The alpha she'd touched gasped audibly, stumbling back. What? No. She hit another one. Showed him a different memory from Kalen's past. A village burned to the ground. Families executed for refusing to bend the knee. Their bodies left in the streets as a warning. Then another, and another, spreading the truth like wildfire through the crowd. Murmurs erupted, shocked whispers turning to shouts. Someone yelled, "Is this real? What is she showing us?" "It's real," the gray-haired council member said, voice shaking. She was gripping the arms of her chair, knuckles white. "I can feel it. This isn't fabrication. This is memory. His memory." Kalen roared, the sound echoing off the vaulted ceiling like thunder. He charged again, faster this time, fury overriding strategy. Isara saw the futures branch. Dodge left and his claws caught her leg, opening her femoral artery. Dodge right. And she had a clear shot at his flank, hold position, and he crushed her against the wall. She chose right, pulling a knife from her belt as she moved. The blade bit into his shoulder, drawing blood. Not deep, not enough to stop him, but enough to prove she could hurt him. He spun with terrifying speed, snarling, and backhanded her with one massive paw. The impact sent her flying. She hit a stone pillar hard enough to crack it, the sound like a gunshot. Stars exploded in her vision. Blood filled her mouth, hot and metallic. Something in her ribs screamed, broken, definitely broken. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Her lungs wouldn't work. Kalen stalked toward her, taking his time now, savoring it. His wolf eyes gleamed with vicious satisfaction. Blood dripped from his shoulder, but he didn't seem to notice or care. The crowd was shouting, some calling for her to get up, others demanding the fight be stopped. The council was arguing among themselves, voices rising in panic and confusion. Isara tried to stand. Her legs wouldn't hold. She collapsed back against the pillar, gasping, each breath like swallowing broken glass. This was it. She'd tried. She'd shown them the truth. But it wasn't enough. She wasn't strong enough. Not fast enough. Not experienced enough. The visions had been right. Most paths led here. To this moment. To her death. Kalen loomed over her, jaws opening wide. She could see down his throat, see the rows of teeth designed to tear flesh from bone. Then Kael's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Isara, the future! Find the path and take it!" The future. Right. She wasn't just seeing what was, she was seeing what could be. Isara closed her eyes, ignoring the pain screaming through every nerve, ignoring the wolf about to kill her, and looked. The paths spread before her like branches of a tree. Most ended here. Now. Her death. Kalen's jaws closing around her throat, crushing her windpipe, shaking her like a rabbit until her neck snapped. But there. One thread. Impossibly thin, barely visible among all the others. A path where she lived. She grabbed it with everything she had left and pulled with desperate strength. Reality shifted. Her hand found something in the rubble from the cracked pillar. A sharp piece of stone, roughly triangular, edges like razors. Her fingers closed around it just as Kalen's jaws descended. She drove the stone upward with both hands, putting every ounce of strength into the movement. It caught him under the jaw, between the plates of bone and muscle. Not lethal, but the sharp edge bit deep into the soft tissue of his throat,
and he reared back with a howl of pain that shook the rafters. Blood sprayed across the floor. She rolled away, using the precious seconds to get to her feet. Her ribs protested violently. Her vision swam, dark spots dancing at the edges. But she was standing, and she was done being afraid. All the terror, all the running, all the nights spent convinced she'd never be safe. It crystallized into white-hot fury, pure and clean and absolutely focused. "You want to see what I can really do?" she said, voice rough and ragged. "Let me show you." She reached for the power Marin had taught her, the dangerous one, the technique that terrified her, the unraveling. But she didn't use it on Kaelin, not yet. She used it on herself. She took every shield, every protection she'd carefully built around her mind over the past month, and tore them down. Let her consciousness expand outward, raw and unfiltered and blindingly bright, touching every mind in the hall at once. And she showed them everything. Not just Kaelin's crimes. Everything. The whole rotten system. The way Omegas were traded like property, bought and sold to settle debts or secure alliances. The way Alphas consolidated power through violence and fear, crushing anyone who questioned the hierarchy. The way the Council looked away when it was convenient, when investigating would threaten their own positions. She showed them her own memories, being told she was worthless from childhood, being sold to pay a debt she never owed, standing in this very hall weeks ago, terrified and alone and convinced she was going to die. She showed them Kael's sister, the woman with auburn hair who'd married an Alpha as ordered, who died 3 months later in an accident everyone knew was murder, but no one investigated. She showed them dozens of other Omegas, all discarded, all forgotten, all buried in unmarked graves or disappeared into the wilderness. And she showed them the future. Not one future, all of them. The paths where nothing changed and the cycle continued, where their children and grandchildren suffered under the same brutal system, and the one narrow, fragile path where it could be different, where things could be better. The hall erupted in absolute chaos. People were screaming, some in horror at what they'd seen, hands pressed to their heads as if they could physically push the visions out. Others in rage, shouting denials and accusations. Several Alphas were fighting, old grievances suddenly brought to the surface. The Council was shouting over each other, trying to restore order and failing completely. But Isara wasn't done. She turned her power back to Kaelin, who was shifting back to human form, one hand pressed to his bleeding throat. His eyes were wide, the first time she'd seen genuine fear in them. "You wanted control," she said, taking a step toward him even though her body screamed in protest. "You wanted power over everyone, over me, but you built it all on lies, and now everyone knows what you really are." "It changes nothing," Kaelin snarled, voice thick with blood. "I'm still stronger than you. You're still a coward," Isara interrupted, and her voice rang through the hall with absolute conviction. "You fight from advantage. You stack the deck. You make sure you can't lose before you even start the game. You killed your own allies when they got too powerful. You murdered women and children to keep your secrets. You're not strong. You're just willing to do things decent people won't." She took another step forward. The crowd had gone quiet, watching. "But here's the thing about truth. Once it's out, you can't put it back in the box. Every person in this room knows what you are now. Every Alpha, every witness. They saw it. They felt it. They lived it through your own memories." She gestured to the crowd. "They'll never look at you the same way again, and neither will their packs. Neither will the kingdom." "They'll forget," Kaelin said, but his voice lacked conviction. "They always do. People are weak. They want to forget uncomfortable truths." "Will they?" She looked around the hall, at faces twisted with shock and disgust and dawning horror, at Alphas who'd supported Kaelin for years now staring at him like they were seeing a stranger. "Because I don't think they will. Not this time. Not when they felt it themselves. Not when the truth came from your own mind." One of the council members, the gray-haired woman Isara had seen before, stepped forward. Her face was pale, aged 10 years in the last few minutes. "Enough. This challenge is suspended pending investigation." "You can't," Kaelin started. "We can, and we will," the woman said, and her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "What we've witnessed here goes beyond a simple combat challenge. These are accusations of high crimes, murder, conspiracy, systematic abuse of power, crimes against the fundamental structures of pack law." She looked at the other council members, most of whom were nodding, still reeling. We need a formal inquiry, immediately, with truth stones and witnesses and proper procedure. Another council member, an old male alpha with scars crisscrossing his face, stood on shaking legs. Agreed. If even a fraction of what we just experienced is accurate— It's not accurate, Kalen said, but he was backing toward the wall now, cornered. She's manipulating you, can't you see? She's a seer, a truth seer. She's showing you what she wants you to see. Planting false memories. This is exactly why seers were eliminated from the bloodlines. They're too dangerous, too.
Then let's verify it, the gray-haired woman said calmly.
We have truth stones in the council vault. Ancient magic, yes, but reliable. Incorruptible. Let's put your memories to the test, Kalen Thorne. Submit to the stones. If she's lying, if these visions are fabricated, it'll show. The stones can't be fooled. She paused, eyes hard as flint. And if she's not lying, if these memories are real, then you'll face justice for every crime. Kalen's face went white, then red with fury. This is absurd! I'm the king! I don't answer to antiquated procedures and— You answer to the old laws, the scarred alpha said, voice like gravel. The same laws that govern this challenge. The same laws that built this kingdom. The same laws that say the council can investigate any alpha accused of crimes against pack structures. He stepped forward, and despite his age, his presence was commanding. The laws you swore to uphold when you took the crown, unless you're refusing to cooperate. The trap closed around Kalen beautifully, inevitably. If he refused, he looked guilty, and the council could strip his title for violation of the old laws. If he agreed, they'd verify every horrible thing Isara had shown them, and he'd face execution. He had no good options left. His jaw clenched so hard Isara could hear his teeth grinding. His hands curled into fists at his sides, claws starting to emerge again. For a moment she thought he might attack anyway. Council and consequences be damned. Thought he might try to slaughter everyone in the room rather than face judgment. Instead, he did something she didn't expect. He smiled. That same cold, calculated smile she remembered from the bonding ceremony. Fine, he said quietly, voice deadly calm. Test me. Verify whatever you need to verify. You'll find I've done nothing wrong. Everything I've done has been for the kingdom, for order, for stability, for keeping the weak from destroying what the strong have built. He looked around the room. And when you understand that my methods were necessary, you'll beg me to take back the crown. Because without me, this kingdom will tear itself apart within a year.
We'll see about that, the gray-haired woman said.
She gestured to guards stationed around the hall. Take him to the council chambers and summon the truth speakers. We'll need witnesses for this. This is going to take time. As guards surrounded Kalen, he looked at Isara one last time. The hatred in his silver eyes was pure and absolute, undiluted by any other emotion. This isn't over, he mouthed silently. Then they led him away, hands bound in iron chains inscribed with runes that suppressed shifting. The moment he was gone, the hall exploded with noise again. People shouting, demanding answers, arguing about what they'd seen. Some alphas were already leaving, probably to send messages to their packs, to prepare for whatever came next. Others clustered in groups, speaking in urgent whispers. The council was trying to restore some semblance of order, but it was like trying to hold back a flood with bare hands. Isara felt her knees give out. Kael appeared at her side instantly, catching her before she hit the floor, supporting her weight with practiced ease. Easy, I've got you. Did we— She couldn't finish the sentence. Her vision was swimming, dark spots expanding. You did it, Kael said quietly, urgently. You changed everything. He can't just kill you and make this go away now. Too many witnesses, too many questions. You forced them to actually investigate instead of just looking the other way. But he's not convicted yet. He's not even— She coughed, tasting blood again. Her ribs were screaming. He could still walk away from this. Maybe. But you've planted doubt in every mind here. And doubt is a powerful thing once it takes root. Kael was already moving toward a side exit, half carrying her. Come on, you need a healer, right now. You're bleeding internally, and you've pushed your abilities way past safe limits. Can't rest yet, Isara mumbled, but her words were slurring. Still have to make sure he— You have to survive first, Kael said firmly. The council's handling Kalen. Let them do their job while you recover. You've done enough for one day. What if they let him go? What if they decide it's easier to just— Then we deal with that when it happens. But right now, you need medical attention before you bleed to death from the inside." She wanted to argue, wanted to stay and watch the council, make sure they followed through, but exhaustion was pulling at her like an anchor, dragging her down into dark water. Her eyes closed despite her best efforts to keep them open. The last thing she heard before unconsciousness claimed her was Kael's voice, rough with worry. "Stay with me. Don't you dare die on me now, not after everything." When she woke, it was dark outside the narrow window. She was in an actual bed, soft, clean sheets, nothing like the rough camps and hard ground she'd slept on for weeks. Actual pillows. Warmth. For a moment, panic seized her. Where was she? Had she been captured? Was this Kaelin's doing? Then she saw Kael asleep in a chair by the door, sword across his lap even in rest, and she remembered. The challenge. The fight. The visions. The council taking Kaelin away. She was in the palace. In a guest room, probably. Safe. For now. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through her torso, sharp and vicious. "Don't move," a voice said. A woman appeared from a corner Isara hadn't noticed. Middle-aged, Beta from her scent, wearing healer's robes. "You've got 3 cracked ribs, severe bruising to your internal organs, and a mild concussion. Plus you nearly burned out your mind using that much power all at once. You're lucky to be alive, frankly." "How long was I out?" 6 hours. It's just past midnight." The healer moved closer, checking Isara's pulse, her eyes, her breathing. "I've given you something for the pain and to help with the internal bleeding, but you need rest. Weeks of it, ideally. What you did out there?" She shook her head, expression somewhere between impressed and horrified. "I've never seen anyone use that level of power and survive. Most seers who try something like that end up vegetables. Brain dead from the strain. Can't rest for weeks," Isara said, though even talking hurt. "Still have to deal with Kaelin. Have to make sure the council is handling it," Kael said from the doorway. He'd woken up, though Isara hadn't heard him move. "They've been at it for hours. Truth stones confirmed everything you showed everyone. Every murder, every crime, every lie." Isara's breath caught. "They believe it? They don't have a choice. The stones don't lie, can't be manipulated or fooled. They show objective truth extracted from memories." Kael stood, stretching stiff muscles. "The council's divided on what to do about it, but they can't deny what happened anymore." "What are the sides?" "Some want him executed immediately. Public beheading, make an example. Others want a formal trial first, witnesses, testimonies, proper legal procedure, and a few—" His expression darkened. "A few are still trying to defend him, saying his methods were harsh but necessary. That strong leadership requires hard choices." "The ones who benefited from his rule," Isara said bitterly. "Exactly. The alphas whose territories he expanded, whose enemies he eliminated, whose power he increased." Kael's jaw tightened. "They're not defending what he did. They're defending the system that made them wealthy and powerful." A knock at the door made Kael's hand drop to his sword, but it was just the gray-haired council member from before. She looked exhausted, aged 20 years, but her eyes were clear and determined. "May I come in?" she asked. Isara nodded, wincing at the movement. The woman entered, closing the door behind her. She pulled up a chair beside the bed, sitting with a heavy sigh. "First, let me introduce myself properly. I'm Elena Greystone. I've served on the council for 32 years, and I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For being blind. For being complicit. For knowing something was wrong with Kaelin's rule and telling myself it wasn't my problem." Elena's hands trembled slightly. "We all knew he was ruthless. We told ourselves it was necessary, strength keeping order, the ends justifying the means. We looked away when convenient and asked no questions when bodies appeared. And now? Now we know better. Now we have to answer for our own failures." She met Isara's eyes directly. "The truth stones confirmed everything you showed us. Every murder, every atrocity, every calculated evil. We've been complicit in the rule of a monster, and that guilt is ours to carry." "What happens to him?" Isara asked. "The council is divided, as your friend said, but we've reached a compromise. There will be a trial in 3 days. Public, transparent. Every crime laid bare for the kingdom to see. Witnesses will testify. Evidence will be presented, and then the council will vote on his fate. You mean some of them might vote to spare him? Isara felt rage stirring despite her exhaustion.
Realistically? No. The evidence is too overwhelming, but we have to follow proper procedure. If we simply execute him without trial, we're no better than he was. We'd be proving that might makes right, that rulers are above the law. Elena leaned forward. The trial serves a purpose beyond just punishing Kalen. It shows the entire kingdom that no one, not even an Alpha King, is beyond accountability. Isara wanted to argue, but she understood the logic. A summary execution would be satisfying, but would change nothing about the system. A public trial could expose the rot completely, force people to confront the truth. "What happens to me?" she asked. Elena smiled slightly. "That's actually why I'm here. The council has been discussing your situation. You invoked the right of challenge under the old laws. Kalen is now facing criminal charges that will almost certainly result in his death or permanent exile, which means, by the strict letter of the law, you've won the challenge. You're entitled to claim his position and territory." The words hung in the air like smoke. Isara stared at her. "You want me to be Alpha Queen?" "Yes." Elena's expression was serious. "Not immediately. There would be a transition period, 3 to 6 months of governance under council supervision, training in statecraft, diplomacy, military matters. But the precedent is there. You challenged him. You exposed his crimes. You've demonstrated both power and principle." "I'm an Omega," Isara said flatly, though the words felt strange now. Half the Alphas in that hall would rather burn the kingdom to the ground than bow to an Omega. "Half, yes. Maybe more than half initially." Elena nodded. "But the winds are changing, Isara. What you did, showing everyone the truth, forcing us to confront our own failures and complicity, that's real leadership. Not dominance through fear, not strength crushing the weak. Vision, courage, the willingness to stand up when it would be safer and easier to stay down. I don't know anything about ruling a kingdom. Neither did Kalen when he started. Neither did most rulers. You learn through doing, through counsel, through making mistakes and correcting them." Elena paused. "But I need to be honest with you. This path, if you choose it, will be incredibly difficult. You'll face opposition from traditionalists, assassination attempts from Kalen's supporters, constant challenges to your authority. Some days you'll wonder if it's worth it. Some days you'll want to walk away. And if I do walk away? If I refuse? Then you're free to go. No charges, no obligations. You've earned the right to disappear if that's what you want. The council will find someone else to rule, probably from one of the old bloodlines, an alpha everyone can accept." Elena's eyes were kind but piercing. "You could live quietly somewhere. Have the peaceful life you probably dreamed about." Isara closed her eyes. She was so tired. Her body hurt everywhere. The idea of just walking away, finding some village where no one knew her name, living without constant danger, it was tempting. So tempting. But she thought of all the Omegas she'd seen in her visions, the ones suffering right now under the same brutal system, the children being raised to believe they were worthless, the women being sold like livestock, the men being discarded when they were no longer useful. If she walked away, nothing changed for them. The system continued. Maybe with a better ruler than Kalen, maybe not. But the fundamental structure remained. Alphas on top, Omegas on bottom, everyone else in between hoping not to fall. "I need time to think," she said, opening her eyes. Elena nodded, standing. "Of course. Take all the time you need, but not too long. The kingdom is watching. We need stability, direction. We need to show people that we're not descending into chaos." She moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think you'd be extraordinary at this. Not because you're perfect, but because you understand what it's like to have no power, no voice. That perspective is invaluable." After she left, Kael moved closer to the bed. "You're actually considering it?" "I don't know. Maybe." Isara looked at him. "Is that insane?" "Completely." He smiled slightly. "But you've been doing insane things since you rejected Kalen in front of his entire court. Why stop now? Because being a ruler, that's different. That's not just survival. That's responsibility for thousands of people. Millions, maybe. That's making decisions that get people killed. That's..."
She struggled to find words. That's everything? Yeah, it is. He sat on the edge of the bed carefully, avoiding her injuries. But here's what I know about you. You give a damn. About people. About fairness. About making things better. That already puts you miles ahead of Kaylin.
Caring doesn't mean I know what I'm doing. No one knows what they're doing at first. You learn. Same way you learn to fight, same way you learn to control your abilities. He was quiet for a moment. The real question isn't whether you can do it. It's whether you want to. Whether you're willing to take on that burden. Isara closed her eyes again. Reached for her power, gently this time, not forcing it. She looked at the futures spreading out from this moment. In one path, she walked away, found a quiet village in the Northern Territories, lived peacefully for decades, died old and content and completely forgotten. The system continued. Other Omegas suffered. Nothing changed except her personal circumstances. In another path, she stayed, claimed the title, fought every single day to change the system from within. Some days she won small victories. Some days she lost spectacularly. She made enemies who tried to kill her, made mistakes that cost lives. But slowly, painfully, things got better. The laws changed. The culture shifted. Not perfectly, not completely. But enough that the next generation of Omegas grew up with choices she'd never had. The second path was harder, infinitely harder, full of pain and struggle and constant battle. But it mattered. It changed things. It meant something. I want to stay, she said, opening her eyes. The decision settled in her chest like a stone, heavy but solid. I want to try. Even if I fail spectacularly, even if I make everything worse somehow, at least I tried. At least I fought for something bigger than just myself. Kale squeezed her hand carefully. Then you'll have help. You're not doing this alone. I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to. Yes, I do. You saved my life multiple times now. Let me return the favor by watching your back while you try to change the world. He smiled, and it was genuine. Besides, someone needs to keep you from doing anything too crazy. Too late for that. Fair point. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity and preparation. Isara recovered slowly, her body healing faster than the healer expected, but still nowhere near full strength. She met with Elena and other council members who supported her potential claim, learned the basics of governance, trade agreements, military structures. It was overwhelming, drowning in information she barely understood. But she learned, absorbed what she could, asked questions when she didn't understand, and she prepared for the trial. On the third day, the Great Hall was packed to bursting, every alpha in the region, representatives from distant territories. Common wolves who'd traveled for days just to witness this. The gallery overflowed with people standing shoulder to shoulder. Kaylin was brought in wearing chains inscribed with runes. He looked diminished somehow, smaller than before, though his eyes still burned with cold fury. The trial lasted 12 hours. Witness after witness came forward. People Kaylin had hurt, families he'd destroyed, soldiers who'd carried out his orders and now regretted it. Each testimony was verified with truth stones, the ancient crystals glowing blue when truth was spoken, remaining dark for lies. Isara testified too. She sat before the council and the assembled witnesses and showed them, carefully, precisely, exactly what she'd seen when she touched Kaylin's mind. His memories, his plans, his complete lack of remorse. The stones glowed brilliant blue throughout her entire testimony. Kaylin didn't defend himself, didn't try to justify or explain. He sat in silence, face carved from stone, watching the proceedings with detached interest. When the testimony finally ended, when the evidence had been laid bare for hours, the senior council member, the scarred Alpha, stood. Kaylin Thorne, you stand accused of hundreds of counts of murder, conspiracy, abuse of power, violation of pack law, and crimes against the fundamental structures of our society. The evidence against you is overwhelming and verified by truth stones. Do you have anything to say before we render judgment? Kaylin stood slowly, chains rattling. When he spoke, his voice carried through the hall with perfect clarity. You think this changes anything? He looked around the room, making eye contact with alphas, who'd supported him for years. You think killing me stops what I built? This kingdom runs on strength, on fear, on the understanding that the powerful rule and the weak submit. Without that structure, without someone willing to make the hard choices, it'll tear itself apart within a year. He turned to Isara specifically. You wanted this. You wanted to destroy me. Fine. You've won. But you'll learn, ruling is infinitely harder than destroying. And when you fail, when the kingdom burns because you're too soft to do what's necessary, remember that I warned you. Remember that I was the only thing holding chaos at bay. You weren't holding back chaos, Isara said quietly. You were creating it. You were the monster everyone was afraid of.
We'll see, Kalen said. He looked back at the council. Do what you will. I regret nothing. The council conferred briefly. The vote was 6-1. 6 for execution, 1 abstention from an alpha who'd benefited greatly from Kalen's rule. Kalen Thorne, the scarred alpha announced, you are hereby found guilty on all counts. The sentence is death, to be carried out tonight at sundown. May you find in death the peace you denied so many others. Kalen laughed, actually laughed, the sound echoing through the stunned hall. Peace? I'll find nothing, and neither will you. You've just signed your own death warrant, all of you. This kingdom won't survive without strength at its head. Then we'll find out, Elena said quietly. Guards, take him. They led him away, still laughing. Isara sat in the gallery, Kael beside her, and felt nothing. Not relief, not satisfaction, just a strange emptiness, like finishing a race only to realize there was no finish line, just another race beginning. You all right? Kael asked. I don't know. I thought I'd feel different, vindicated or something. It's never that simple. He stood, offering his hand. Come on. They want to talk to you about what comes next. What came next was an announcement. That same evening, after Kalen's sentence was carried out, quick and clean, a beheading in the courtyard witnessed by hundreds, the council called another assembly in the great hall. Isara stood on the dais, the same place where she'd been sold weeks ago, where she'd rejected Kalen, where she'd fought for her life. Now she stood there in different clothes, not a ceremonial gown, but practical armor mixed with formal robes, a compromise between warrior and diplomat that Elena had suggested. The hall was packed again, the same faces, now looking at her with new eyes, curiosity, skepticism, fear, hope, a chaotic mix. Elena stepped forward, addressing the crowd. By the old laws and the reality we now face, the council recognizes Isara Vale as alpha apparent. She will serve a transition period of 6 months, during which she will govern with our guidance and oversight. At the end of that period, if she is proven capable, the council will formally confirm her position as Alpha Queen. The murmurs were immediate, shocked, angry, confused. Elena raised her hand for silence. This is unprecedented, an Omega rising to rule. But these are unprecedented times. We must adapt or be destroyed by our own rigidity. Kalen Thorne nearly destroyed us with his brutality. We cannot make the same mistakes again. She's too weak, someone shouted from the crowd, an alpha with gray in his beard. An Omega can't lead wolves. It's against nature. Is it? Elena's voice cracked like a whip. Or is that just what we've been telling ourselves for centuries to justify a hierarchy that serves the powerful? Isara Vale defeated Kalen Thorne, exposed his crimes, survived his attempt to kill her. If that's weakness, I'd like to know what strength looks like. Not everyone looked convinced, but enough people were nodding, enough to matter. Elena turned to Isara. Do you accept this responsibility? Isara stepped forward. Her voice was steady despite the terror churning in her gut. I do, but I need all of you to understand something. She looked around the hall, meeting eyes, making it personal. I'm not Kalen. I won't rule through fear or domination. I'll rule through transparency, through actually listening to the people I'm supposed to serve, through making myself accountable to you. She paused. That means you get to challenge me, question my decisions, demand explanations. I'm not above the law. I'm bound by it, same as everyone else. That sounds nice, the gray-bearded alpha called out again. But talk is cheap. How do we know you won't become just like him? Power corrupts. Always has. Always will. You don't know, Isara said honestly. Neither do I. I can't promise I'll never make mistakes or abuse my position. I'm not perfect. But here's what I can promise. I won't hide my mistakes. I won't lie to you. And if I do abuse my power, you can remove me. The same laws that brought me here apply to me too. And what about Omegas? A woman shouted from the back. An Omega herself, Isara could tell. What changes for us? Everything, Isara said, and her voice rang with absolute conviction. Starting tomorrow, no more forced bondings, no more selling people to settle debts. Omegas have the same rights as any other wolf, the same legal protections, the same voice in pack decisions. She looked at Elena. I want that written into law, codified, enforced with real penalties. Elena nodded. It will be done. You have my word. The murmurs through the crowd were intense now, some approving, some uncertain, some outright hostile. An alpha in expensive clothes stood up, face red with anger. This is insanity. You're destroying the natural order. Alphas lead because we're stronger. No, Isara interrupted. You lead because the system was designed to keep you on top. But systems can change. Will change. Starting now. The hostile alpha looked like he wanted to argue more, but Elena cut him off. The decision is made. Those who support it, welcome. Those who don't. Her smile was cold. Find somewhere else to live. We're building something new here. Either help or get out of the way. After the ceremony, after the shouting died down and the hall slowly emptied, Isara found herself alone in a small garden outside the palace. The same garden where she'd stood weeks ago, terrified and lost, with no idea what would happen next. She looked different now, stood differently. The girl who'd run into the storm was gone. Someone else had taken her place. Not harder, not crueler, just more. More certain, more determined, more aware of both her power and its limits. You handled that well, Elena said, appearing from a doorway. The speech, the promises, you sounded like a real leader. I'm terrified, Isara admitted. I have no idea what I'm actually doing. I'm making this up as I go. Good. That means you're not a sociopath. The old woman smiled. The best leaders are the ones who question themselves, who worry about getting it right. The moment you stop being scared is the moment you become dangerous like Kalen was. Did he start out scared? Maybe. Once. A long time ago before power twisted him into something unrecognizable. Elena was quiet for a moment. You asked for time to think. You've made your decision. But I need to know, are you absolutely sure? Because once you start down this path, there's no going back. You'll make enemies, powerful ones, people who'll want you dead simply for what you represent. Change they don't want. I know. Isara looked at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. But if I walk away now, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. At least this way, I'm fighting for something that matters, for people who have no one else fighting for them. Then fight well, fight smart, fight dirty when you have to. Elena's expression softened. And remember, you're not alone. You have allies. Use them, trust them, let them help carry the weight. She left Isara to her thoughts. A few minutes later, Kael found her. They're asking for you, he said. Council wants to discuss immediate reforms, trade policy, tax redistribution, diplomatic outreach to neighboring territories. Very exciting bureaucratic stuff. She laughed despite herself, the sound surprising her. I have absolutely no idea how to handle any of that. Then you'll learn. Same as everything else. He offered his hand. Come on. Your kingdom awaits. Time to start changing the world. She took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. Together they walked back toward the palace, toward meetings and responsibilities and 1,000 decisions she'd have to make. Behind them, the garden stood quiet and empty. The place where a terrified girl had once stood, ready to run forever, convinced she had no power and no future. Now it was just a garden. And Isara Vale was no longer that girl. She was something new, something the kingdom had never seen before. An Omega who refused to be broken, who'd taken her pain and turned it into power, who'd looked at an impossible situation and chosen to fight rather than flee. The road ahead would be brutal, she knew that. There would be setbacks and failures, enemies who wanted her dead, days when she questioned everything, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready. The first month was hell. Isara woke every morning to a mountain of decisions that needed immediate attention. Trade disputes between territories. Food shortages in the outer regions. Alphas testing her authority with increasingly bold challenges.
Every day brought a new crisis, a new problem that had no easy solution, and she was failing at half of them. The Northern Territories are refusing to send their grain quota, Elena reported during one of their daily meetings. They claim you're illegitimate, that an Omega has no right to demand tribute. Isara rubbed her temples, fighting off another headache. What are my options? Send soldiers to enforce compliance, show strength, make an example. That's what Kalen would have done. Yes. And it worked. Elena's expression was neutral. I'm not saying it's right, but sometimes rulers have to make choices between bad and worse. There has to be another way. Then find it, but do it fast. If the Northern Territories get away with defiance, others will follow. You'll lose control before you even establish it. Isara dismissed the meeting and spent the next 6 hours studying maps, trade routes, resource distributions, looking for leverage that didn't involve violence. She found it in water rights. The Northern Territories controlled grain production, but their rivers originated in regions loyal to her. She sent a message. Comply with the grain quota, or the upstream regions would divert water during the growing season. The Northern Territories capitulated within 3 days. It wasn't a perfect solution. She'd essentially used the same coercive tactics Kalen had, just wrapped in different packaging. But it worked without bloodshed, and that was something. Kale found her that night in the palace library, surrounded by books on governance and law. You should sleep, he said. Can't. Too much to learn. You can't learn it all in a month. Watch me. She didn't look up from the text on historical trade agreements. Kale sat down across from her. You're burning yourself out. I can see it. The council can see it. Even the servants are worried. I don't have time to burn out. Every decision I make, people are watching, waiting for me to fail, waiting to say, see, we told you an Omega couldn't lead. She finally looked at him, and the exhaustion in her eyes was profound. I can't afford to be weak, not even for a second. You're not weak. You're human. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, they look the same. Kale reached across the table, closing the book she was reading. Listen to me. You want to know the fastest way to fail? Keep going like this. No sleep, no rest. Running yourself into the ground trying to prove something. You'll make mistakes. Big ones. And then your enemies will pounce. So what am I supposed to do? Delegate, trust people. You've got an entire council and administrative staff. Use them. He softened his voice. You don't have to do this alone. That's the whole point of not being a tyrant. Isara wanted to argue, but she was so tired, and he was right. Okay, she said quietly. I'll try. The second month was slightly better. She learned to trust her advisors, learned which ones were competent and which were just trying to maintain their own power, learned to read the political currents beneath the surface of every interaction. But the real challenges came from the alphas who'd supported Kalen. They couldn't challenge her directly, not with the council's backing, but they found other ways to undermine her authority. Slow-walking her orders. Misunderstanding her directives. Spreading rumors that she was incompetent, that the kingdom was falling apart under Omega leadership. The worst was Alpha Marcus Blackwood, who controlled the eastern mining territories, rich, influential, and completely opposed to everything Isara represented. He came to the palace in the 3rd month, ostensibly to discuss mining quotas. The workers are unhappy, he said, sitting across from her in the formal meeting room. You've given them too many rights, too many protections. They're getting lazy. Production is down 15%. Isara had studied the mining reports. Production was actually up 3%, but working conditions had improved significantly. Fewer deaths, fewer injuries, actual safety standards. The workers are more productive when they're not dying in cave-ins, she said evenly. The numbers support that. The numbers support whatever you want them to support. Marcus leaned back, studying her. You're playing a dangerous game, little Omega. Disrupting the natural order, giving power to people who don't know how to wield it. People like me, you mean? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Isara met his eyes. Let me be very clear, Alpha Blackwood. The safety regulations stay. The workers' protections stay. If you can't run your operations within those parameters, I'll find someone who can. His eyes flashed with anger. You can't just replace me. My family has controlled those mines for generations. I know.
And for generations, workers have died unnecessarily while your family got rich. She stood. Times have changed. Adapt or step aside. He stood too, towering over her, using his size to intimidate. You think you're so clever, so righteous, but you're just a child playing at power. Sooner or later, you'll make a mistake. And when you do, I'll be there to remind everyone why Omegas should never rule. Then I'll try not to make mistakes around you. She held his gaze. Was there anything else? He left without another word. Elena, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner as an observer, spoke up. You just made a very dangerous enemy. I know. He'll retaliate. Probably try to organize the other old guard alphas against you. Let him try. Isara sank back into her chair, exhaustion washing over her. I'm tired of placating people who want me to fail. If they're going to oppose me anyway, I might as well do the right thing. Bold strategy. Elena smiled slightly. Reckless, but bold. The retaliation came 2 weeks later. Marcus organized a formal challenge to her authority through the council. He demanded a vote of no confidence, claiming she was destroying the kingdom's economic foundations with her radical reforms. 7 alphas signed onto his petition. Not enough to remove her, but enough to force a public hearing. The night before the hearing, Isara barely slept. She went over her arguments, her evidence, her rebuttals. But beneath the preparation was fear. What if she lost? What if they voted her out? What if Kaelin had been right? What if she wasn't strong enough for this? She found herself in the garden again, the one where she'd stood so many times before. The air was cold, winter settling over the kingdom. Couldn't sleep either? She turned. An old woman stood at the garden entrance, not Elena, someone else. She moved slowly, using a cane, but her eyes were sharp and clear. I'm sorry, We haven't met. I'm Mira Ashwood. I served on the council 40 years ago before I retired. The old woman made her way to a stone bench, sitting with a grateful sigh. I heard about tomorrow's hearing, came to see the Omega who has everyone so worked up. And what do you think? I think you're terrified and trying not to show it. Mira's smile was knowing. I also think you're doing better than anyone expected, including yourself. Isara sat beside her. How can you tell? Because you're still here, still fighting. Most people in your position would have run by now, taken the easy path, but you haven't. She looked at Isara with something like approval. You want to know a secret about leadership? Please. It's not about being perfect. It's not about never making mistakes or always having the right answer. It's about showing up, making the best decision you can with the information you have. And when you're wrong, because you will be wrong sometimes, admitting it and doing better. What if tomorrow they vote me out? What if Marcus wins? Then you'll know you tried. You'll know you stood for something. That matters more than winning. Mira stood slowly. But between you and me, I don't think you're going to lose. I've seen the reports. Read the testimonies from people whose lives you've changed. You've got more support than you realize. How do you know? Because I've been talking to people, listening. And what I hear is that Omegas finally have hope. Workers finally have protection. Common wolves finally have a ruler who sees them as people, not resources. She patted Isara's shoulder. Don't let fear make you doubt what you've already accomplished. The hearing the next day was brutal. Marcus presented his case with practiced eloquence. He had charts showing economic disruption, testimonies from other alphas about chaos in their territories, a compelling narrative about how Isara's inexperience and emotional decision-making were destroying centuries of stability. When it was her turn, Isara stood before the assembled council and the packed gallery. She didn't use notes, didn't rely on prepared speeches. Instead, she told the truth. Alpha Blackwood is right about one thing. I've disrupted the old order. I've changed laws that have been in place for generations. I've given rights to people who've never had them before. She looked at Marcus. But he's wrong about why. I'm not doing this because I'm emotional or inexperienced. I'm doing it because the old order was built on suffering, on people being treated as disposable, on Omegas like me being sold to pay debts we never owed. She turned to address the full council and gallery. You want to know if I'm qualified to lead? Ask the miners who aren't dying in cave-ins anymore. Ask the Omegas who can finally choose their own mates. Ask the families who aren't starving because I redistributed grain from territories hoarding it. Her voice strengthened. I'm not perfect.
I've made mistakes. I'll make more. But every decision I make for the people. Not for power. Not for wealth. For the actual lives I'm supposed to protect. She pulled out a folder of documents. These are testimonies from across the kingdom. Letters from people whose lives have changed in the last 3 months. Not all positive. Some are angry about the changes. But most, she held up the thick stack. Most are from people who finally have hope, who finally feel seen, who finally believe the system might work for them instead of against them. She set the folder on the council table. Alpha Blackwood wants you to vote me out because I'm disrupting his profits, because safety equipment costs money, because treating workers like people means he can't exploit them as easily. She met his eyes. He's not concerned about the kingdom. He's concerned about his wealth, and he's hoping you won't notice the difference. The gallery erupted in noise. Shouts of agreement, angry denials. The council called for order. When silence finally fell, Elena stood. The council will now vote. All in favor of removing Isara Vale from her position as Alpha Apparent, raise your hands. Marcus's hand went up immediately. 2 other Alphas followed, old guard members who'd supported Kalen. 3 out of 7. All opposed? 4 hands. Elena, the scarred Alpha, and 2 others. The motion fails. Isara Vale retains her position. Marcus's face went purple with rage. He stood abruptly, knocking his chair over. This is a farce. You're destroying everything our ancestors built, everything that made us strong. No, Isara said quietly. I'm building something better, something that doesn't require people to suffer for others to thrive. You're welcome to be part of it or not. Your choice. He left, 3 supporters following him out. The gallery exploded in a mix of cheers and angry shouts. But Isara had won. The 4th month brought unexpected support. A delegation of Omegas from across the kingdom traveled to the capital. 50 of them, led by a woman named Sarah, who'd been sold to an Alpha at 14 and finally escaped after 20 years. We came to say thank you, Sarah said, standing in the great hall with tears streaming down her face. You gave us hope. You changed laws that seemed unchangeable. You made it possible for us to imagine a different future. I'm just trying to do the right thing, Isara said. You're doing more than that. You're showing everyone that Omegas aren't weak, that we're not disposable, that we matter. Sarah's voice broke. My daughter is 10 years old. Because of you, she won't be sold when she comes of age. She'll have choices I never had. That's everything. The delegation stayed for 3 days. They met with the council, sharing their stories, putting human faces to the abstract policies Isara had implemented. By the time they left, even some of the skeptical Alphas were reconsidering their positions. But the biggest challenge came in the 5th month. A border dispute with a neighboring kingdom, the Ironwood realm, escalated into violence. Ironwood soldiers crossed into Isara's territory, claiming ancient rights to a disputed forest region. The military commanders wanted to respond with force. We need to show strength, they argued. If we let them take our land, we look weak. How many people will die if we go to war? Isara asked. Does it matter? We're defending our territory. It matters to me. Give me numbers. The commander looked uncomfortable. Conservative estimates? A few hundred on each side. If it escalates, potentially thousands. Isara thought of all the letters she'd received, all the families who'd thanked her for making their lives better. How many of those families would she destroy by starting a war? I want to try diplomacy first. The Ironwood King doesn't do diplomacy. He only respects strength. Then we'll show him a different kind of strength. She looked at Elena. Arrange a meeting. I'll go myself. The council objected strenuously. Too dangerous, too risky. If the Ironwood King captured her, they'd have no leverage. But Isara insisted. She traveled to the border with a small delegation, Kyle, Elena, and 2 guards. The Ironwood King met them in a neutral zone, a clearing between territories. He was everything the report said, massive, scarred, with eyes like chips of ice. He looked at Isara with open contempt. So the rumors are true. An Omega leading wolves. How progressive. His voice dripped with sarcasm. We don't have to like each other to negotiate, Isara said calmly. The disputed forest region. What do you actually need from it? Resources? Territory? Pride? It belonged to my ancestors. 5 generations ago, yes. Before the Treaty of Winter Crossing redrew the borders.
You want to refight century-old wars, or do you want to find a solution that benefits both our kingdoms? He studied her. You're different than I expected. More spine than sense. I get that a lot. She pulled out maps. The forest has valuable timber and medicinal plants. What if we split it? You get the northern section with the best timber. I keep the southern section with the plant resources. We establish a neutral zone in the middle. No soldiers, no settlements, just buffer space. And if I just take it all by force, then we go to war. Your soldiers die. My soldiers die. Our economies suffer. And at the end of it, you'll hold territory you have to constantly defend from rebellion because the people there don't want to be ruled by you. She met his eyes. Or you can take half, maintain peace, and we can even discuss trade agreements that benefit both kingdoms. Your choice. The Ironwood King was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed, a genuine surprise sound. You've got guts, I'll give you that. Fine, we'll split it. But I want favorable trade terms on iron ore. And I want access to your coastal ports for shipping. Done. They negotiated for 6 more hours, working out the details. By sunset, they had an agreement, a treaty that prevented war and established beneficial trade between kingdoms. On the ride back, Elena looked at Isara with something approaching awe. You just prevented a war, without bloodshed, without even threatening force. I got lucky. He was reasonable. No, you were smart. You found what he actually wanted beneath the bluster and gave him a path to get it without fighting. That's real leadership. The treaty signing happened 2 weeks later in the Great Hall. Representatives from both kingdoms witnessed it. The Ironwood King signed with a flourish, then looked at Isara. You're young yet, but you'll be formidable if you survive long enough. He said it like a compliment and a warning. I plan to, Isara replied. After he left, the hall erupted in celebration. The common wolves especially, they understood what peace meant. Their sons and daughters wouldn't die in a pointless war. Isara felt something shift that day. A turning point. She'd proven she could handle not just internal politics, but external threats. She could protect the kingdom without Kaelin's brutality. She was actually doing this. The 6th month arrived with shocking speed. The council called a final evaluation session. Isara presented her accomplishments, new laws protecting omegas, improved worker safety regulations, the Ironwood Treaty, economic growth in previously neglected regions, reduced corruption through transparency requirements. But she also presented her failures: resistance from Old Guard alphas, ongoing disputes in several territories, economic disruption in industries that had relied on exploitation, her own mistakes in judgment that had cost time and resources. Leadership isn't about being perfect, she told the council. It's about being honest, about learning, about making things better even when it's hard. The vote was unanimous. All 7 council members confirmed her as Alpha Queen. The coronation was set for the new moon, a symbolic fresh start. The night before, Isara couldn't sleep. She stood in the garden one last time, looking at the stars, thinking about the girl who'd stood in this exact spot 6 months ago, terrified and lost. That girl was gone. Someone else had taken her place. Big day tomorrow, Kael said, appearing beside her. Terrifying day. You'll be fine. You've already proven you can do this. Have I? Or am I just stumbling forward hoping I don't break anything? That's what everyone does. You're just honest about it. He was quiet for a moment. My sister would have been proud of you, of what you've built. Isara felt tears prick her eyes. I wish I could have known her. She was a lot like you, kind, stubborn, convinced she could make things better even when everyone said it was impossible. He smiled sadly. She would have loved watching you prove them all wrong. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Thank you, Isara said eventually, for staying, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Where else would I go? Your family now. Broken, strange, definitely insane family, but family. The coronation was nothing like the bonding ceremony had been. The Great Hall was packed, but this time the faces were different, hopeful, excited. Even the skeptics looked curious rather than hostile. Isara wore armor mixed with ceremonial robes, Elena's idea, symbolizing both warrior and diplomat. She walked down the center aisle, and this time she didn't see enemies. She saw her people. The council stood waiting. Elena held the crown, not Kaelin's ostentatious thing, but something new, simple, elegant, functional.
Isara Vale, Elena said, voice carrying through the hall. You have served as Alpha Apparent for 6 months. In that time, you have proven yourself capable, compassionate, and committed to the welfare of all wolves, not just the powerful. The council has voted unanimously to confirm you as Alpha Queen. She placed the crown on Isara's head. It was lighter than Isara expected. It didn't feel like a burden. It felt like responsibility, like purpose. Do you swear to lead with wisdom and justice? To protect the weak and hold the strong accountable? To serve the kingdom before yourself? I do. Then by the power vested in us by the old laws and the new reality, we recognize you as Alpha Queen. May your reign be long and prosperous. The hall erupted in applause. Not everyone clapped. A few old guard alphas stood in stony silence. But most people were celebrating. Isara looked out at the crowd and saw Sarah, the Omega who'd thanked her, tears streaming down her face. Saw miners from the Eastern Territories. Saw common wolves who'd finally been given a voice. And she understood something fundamental. This wasn't about her being special or extraordinary. It was about what she represented. The possibility that systems could change, that the powerless could become powerful, that suffering wasn't inevitable. She was a symbol, and symbols mattered. After the ceremony, there was a feast. Isara made her rounds, greeting people, listening to their concerns and their joy. She was exhausted but energized, overwhelmed but determined. Late that night, she finally escaped to a balcony overlooking the city. Elena found her there. How does it feel? The old woman asked. Terrifying, exciting, impossible, real. Isara laughed. All of it at once. That sounds about right. Elena stood beside her, looking out at the lights. You know, this is just the beginning, right? The real work starts now. I know, there's so much left to do, so many problems to solve. And you'll solve them. Or you won't. You'll make good decisions and bad ones. You'll succeed and fail. Elena's voice was gentle. But you'll do it honestly, with integrity. That's what matters. Is it enough? It has to be. It's all any of us have. They stood in silence for a while. Then Elena spoke again. You asked me once if Kalen started out scared, if power corrupted him or if he was always a monster. I remember. I've been thinking about it. I think he was scared once. Terrified, probably. But instead of using that fear to build empathy, he used it to justify cruelty. He convinced himself that being soft was weakness, that mercy was failure. She looked at Isara. You're scared too. But you're using it differently. You're letting it make you better, not bitter. I hope so. I know so. Elena squeezed her shoulder. Now get some rest. Tomorrow you start actually ruling, and trust me, it's going to be exhausting. After Elena left, Isara stood alone on the balcony. She thought about everything that had led here, the bonding ceremony where it all started, the rejection that should have killed her, the flight through the snow, Kael's cabin, Marin's training, the challenge, the trial, the months of proving herself. It felt like a lifetime compressed into half a year. She pulled out a small mirror from her pocket, a gift from Sarah. Looked at her own reflection. She looked older, harder in some ways, but not broken, not crushed, stronger. I did it, she whispered to the reflection, to the girl she used to be. We did it. The next morning, Isara held her first official council meeting as confirmed Alpha Queen. The agenda was overwhelming: trade disputes, infrastructure repairs, ongoing tensions with traditionalist alphas, requests for aid from struggling territories. But she approached each item methodically, listened to advisors, made decisions, delegated when appropriate, stood firm when necessary. It wasn't perfect. She made mistakes, approved a budget that had to be revised, misread the political situation in the Western Territories, misjudged an alpha's intentions, and had to walk back a promise. But she learned, adjusted, kept moving forward. That became the pattern of the next months. Problem. Solution attempt. Failure or success. Learning. Repeat. Slowly, incrementally, things got better. The Omega protection laws took real effect. Forced bondings dropped to nearly zero. Women who'd been trapped in abusive situations found ways out. Children grew up knowing they had choices. Worker safety regulations saved lives. The mining accidents that had been routine under Marcus's management became rare. Other industries adopted similar standards, and productivity actually increased. The treaty with Ironwood opened new trade routes. Both kingdoms prospered. Other neighboring realms reached out, wanting similar agreements.
It wasn't utopia. Problems remained. Poverty, inequality, resistance from those who'd benefited from the old system, criminals who exploited the new freedoms, mistakes in policy that created unintended consequences. But it was better. Measurably, demonstrably better. And Isara kept working. A year after her coronation, she received a letter. It was from a young Omega in the Southern Territories. A girl named Mari, 13 years old. Dear Alpha Queen, I wanted to thank you. My father was going to sell me to an alpha from the neighboring pack to pay off gambling debts. But because of your new laws, he can't. I get to stay home. I get to go to school. I get to choose my own future. Everyone says you're too young to be queen, that Omegas are too weak to lead. But you're not weak. You're the strongest person I know. You change the world for people like me. When I grow up, I want to be like you. I want to fight for people who can't fight for themselves. I want to make things better. Thank you for showing me that's possible. Maria Isara read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. This was why she'd stayed, why she'd fought, why she endured the constant pressure and criticism and exhaustion. Because somewhere, a 13-year-old girl had hope now, had a future, had choices. That mattered more than anything. She kept the letter in her desk drawer. On hard days, and there were many, she'd take it out and read it again. Remember why this work was worth it. 5 years after her coronation, Isara stood in the Great Hall once more. But this time she wasn't being judged or challenged or crowned. She was there to witness history. The council was voting on a constitutional reform she'd proposed, abolishing the hierarchy that ranked wolves by alpha, beta, omega designation, making all positions based on merit and choice rather than biology and tradition. It was radical, revolutionary. Many said it was impossible. The vote was close, 4-3, but it passed. The hall erupted in celebration and outrage in equal measure. Isara stood at the center of it all, calm despite the chaos. This was the culmination of everything she'd fought for. Not just better treatment for Omegas, but fundamental change to the system itself. It would take years to implement fully. Decades, maybe. And there would be resistance every step of the way. But it was possible now. Real. That night, she returned to the garden. The place where everything had changed. Kael found her there, as he always did. You did it, he said. Actually did it. Changed the entire system. We did it. Couldn't have without you, without Elena, without everyone who believed this was possible. Still, pretty impressive for someone who was running for her life 5 years ago. Isara smiled. Feels like a different lifetime. It was a different you. He sat beside her on the stone bench. You ever regret it? Staying? Taking this on? She thought about it honestly. Some days, when things go wrong, when I make mistakes that hurt people, when I'm so tired I can barely think. She paused. But no, not really. Because even on the worst days, I know I'm doing something that matters, that I'm making a difference. That's all anyone can ask for. They sat in comfortable silence. What happens now? Kael asked eventually. You've accomplished what you set out to do. Change the laws, reform the system. You could step back, let someone else lead. I could, Isara agreed, but I won't, not yet. There's still too much work to do, too many people who need someone fighting for them. You're going to work yourself to death. Probably, but it'll be worth it, he laughed. You're insane, you know that, right? Takes one to know one. They sat together as the stars came out, 2 survivors watching the world they'd helped reshape. Isara thought about the girl she'd been, the one sold like property, the one who'd stood in this garden terrified and alone, convinced she had no power and no future. That girl would never have believed this was possible, would never have imagined she could change anything, let alone everything. But she had, not because she was special or chosen or destined, but because she'd refused to accept that suffering was inevitable, because she'd stood up when it would have been easier to stay down, because she'd turned her pain into purpose, and in doing so, she'd proven something fundamental about power. It didn't come from strength or dominance or fear. It came from truth, from courage, from the willingness to fight for something bigger than yourself. Real power was making the world better for people who came after you, people you'd never meet, people whose lives you'd change without ever knowing their names. Like Mari, the 13-year-old girl who now had choices Isara never had. Like countless other Omegas who could finally imagine different futures. Like the children who would grow up in a world where biology didn't determine destiny. That was Isara's legacy. Not a crown, not a title, not her name in history books, but the lives she'd changed, the hope she'd created, the system she'd helped break and rebuild into something better. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was better than before. And better was enough. "You ready to go in?" Kyle asked. "Council meeting early tomorrow." "Another one?" or Isara groaned. "You're the queen. It's kind of your job." I know. She stood, stretching. "Let's go. No rest for the wicked." Or the righteous, apparently. They walked back toward the palace together, leaving the garden quiet behind them. And Isara Vale, once a powerless Omega sold to pay a debt, now Alpha Queen who'd changed a kingdom, smiled. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. You didn't have to accept the world as it was. You could fight to make it what it should be. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be fast. It wouldn't be perfect. But it was possible. And possible was enough to build a revolution on.